Hello, good morning, afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. We're back again. Let's see. So it's very interesting the way, as soon as I turn on the camera, all of a sudden I'm getting energy information that's pouring into my head. There's like, don't forget this, don't forget this. It wasn't here 2 minutes ago because I wrote all of these notes. And then as soon as I turn the camera on, I get this big energy stream that comes in from the left side. I was also going to talk about, I swear to God, I'm organized before the camera starts rolling. It has to do with flow. I'm very well aware that it has to have a place to go. The energy has to have a place to go. So it starts running as soon as like the channel opens up, more comes pouring in. So I prepare as much as I can, and then, but I can only prepare so much. So I'm writing I'm keeping additional notes. Yeah, no matter how much I try to prepare, it just doesn't work. So biological timing. Hang on a minute. Natural cycles. Okay. So I don't know if I'm going to get to that or not. Per usual, I come prepared to this thing with all of these notes. And what usually happens is that there's a buildup of energy. There's a buildup of information. So I've got all this data. And it's always available, but I have noticed that the flow is prompted by something. It's usually prompted by something, for some reason, going back to urine, to pick up on our last topic, if you watched my previous live stream, there's usually a certain buildup where you can only hold the information or the stream of whatever, the stream of information for so long. And I've noticed that there's usually some kind of a prompt where I will suddenly know that I need to get a certain information that has to go, certain data has to go to a given location. And it often comes at a really inconvenient time. I've noticed that too, where I don't have, when I try to schedule these live streams, I live with 2 other people in this house, and it's a 1-bedroom apartment, and there's no door in my daughter's bedroom. So I always try to find a time where nobody else is here, because I can't do it with somebody else in the house. But I also can't schedule the live stream because it's not up to me. I just can't do it. It's kind of like when it wants to land, but it does seem to build up a little bit like a sneeze, when you kind of know you have to sneeze, but you'd be hard pressed to put an actual timestamp on it ahead of schedule. When it lands, but before that you're like, okay, a sneeze is building. That's the way the live streams are. So I've got all these things that I know I need to talk about. Different levels of resistance. This is Kenji. I'm not sure he's going to be on for much longer. I might put him down. It's hard to I like to have him here. It would be helpful if I had some sort of a tree or someplace where I could park him in the back. Because I always want to have my animals on with me in the background. It's really important. But I also can't talk or focus as much as I want when they're like directly engaging with me. Anyway, so I want him to make an appearance because I want his energy. He's a lovely, lovely, lovely corn snake, friendliest snake I've ever had. Corn snakes in general are very friendly, but he's the friendliest snake I've ever owned. We take him shopping. He loves to go in my pocketbook, and he'll just kind of hang out in there. And one time he hid in there, and I didn't know he was in there, and I grabbed my pocketbook. I kind of forgot he was out, And I grabbed my pocketbook and I went to the supermarket and I discovered him at the checkout. And I was like, oh, he's in here. And I was surprised, but the checkout woman the cashier was more surprised than I was. Anyway, okay, I'm going to go put him down. Hang on 1 second, and then we'll start talking. Here you go. He's a fabulous snake. Okay, so my nose already started running. That's a good sign. That means information wants to come through. The more water movement we have, the better we are. All right, so I was going to talk about, let's see what's first on this list. All of a sudden it's okay. I think I'm just going to start. I've got specific information that needs to go to different groups. So you're already getting an energetic transmission. I want to talk about the way energy, oh, this is interesting. We're getting different levels of density right now. I'm noticing it, and probably because that was what I wanted to talk about anyway. And it's interesting, if you look in the background, all of the light is coming down from, we're talking about grids, or I was about to talk about grids, and all of the fauna is in the bottom. Light travels at different speeds. Data altogether travels at different speeds through different levels of density. And I've got a lot to say about spiritual communications, the way spirit communication and the way we pick it up, the way it likes to travel, and why certain things, one of my big frustrations, or I shouldn't say it that way, I should say, it's definitely an area of specialized interest for me for a really long time, is the delivery of, as Joan of Arc and also as a composer when I was John Stanley, I have an interest in the movement of energy and data. So tones are data. The delivery of all manner of resources. So a resource can be space. If you need room, a resource is space. If you need something tangible, tangible resources are resources. Time is a resource. Data, information is also a resource. And when you create a living system, one of the things you need to do is make sure that all of the creatures, all of the beings get everything that they require to live, to do the job that they're supposed to do. That they get all of the tools they need and the knowledge of how to use those tools in time to employ them for the purpose for which they were intended. And this presents a lot of challenges. It's an area that I spend a lot of time thinking about. And I wanted to, we're also experiencing for the last 10 years, since let me go back and rephrase that. I do a lot of work with time travel and timeline repair because, do I not want to go into that discussion right now. There has been a significant amount of timeline bleed through where we had to go back and actually repair historical events that we applied them first, and then we waited for them to do something, and then we kind of went back in and repaired it, which we knew it was only supposed to run for a certain amount of time, but then we had to go back in and repair it. A little bit like time surgery, where that there's if you've ever watched like Star Trek: The Next Generation or Doctor Who. I'm not really familiar with Doctor Who, but I know that they often talk about a gash in space-time. That's an actual gash in space-time that was an interdimensional gash, not just a timeline gash, but there was an interdimensional gash, and there was a real problem on this planet where, hang on a minute, I want to make sure he doesn't knock that over. He might trip over the cord. Okay, we'll see what happens. If there's a massive crash, it's because Luke knocked over the fan. Stay there, please. Yeah, there was a massive gash in space-time. So there was a period of time where timelines that should not have been, that should have been, you know how timeline goes in a spiral, a lot like the, oh gosh, hang on a minute. Sorry. What? Come on. Come over. Come on. Sorry. I want to make sure he doesn't knock that over. Oh, dang it. Sorry. Where events from higher timelines, you know how you ask for help from your higher self? Events sometimes from higher timelines or from lower timelines bleed through, and so you wind up getting, in this particular location, you wind up getting a lot of mixed information. And it did serve a purpose. It really did serve a purpose. It's linked to very strongly to the Joan of Arc timeline, where we were trying to get information, essential information, to a much lower stuck place where they weren't developing. And the Joan of Arc template was put there, seated by me, with a team of people, in order to accelerate the spiritual development by a lot. Like, you're going to go up, down, and get them moving, because they just keep doing the same thing over and over again. You've had 100 years of war at this point, and nobody's learning anything. There's just no budging them. So let's go and apply a new energy and a new pattern so that we can get, and we're going to make it as contagious as possible. It's also very much linked to the pandemic. It is. And I can talk about that at a later time, but there was, it wasn't supposed to run forever. We were going to go do something to create an accelerated development, because otherwise they seriously, what are you doing? Okay, go lie down there. Good. Want to make sure he wasn't poised to pee. He lay down because he's a good boy. We had to apply an accelerated development for a margin of time. This is not at all what I was going to talk about, but it did serve. It served a number of purposes, and I could probably write at length about what all of those were. It would really take a whole book. But it's the juncture of individuation, the linear construct, where linearity and that mentality that only goes in the one direction. In the third dimension, everything only goes in one direction. You know, time only moves in. You can go backwards, but you can't go forward. Because you reach a choice point. When you hit the third dimension, you become singular, and everything is singular. It's a realm of duality, so it's a place where you constantly have to choose one thing or another. So you can't go back in time. So if you're going to work from, if you're going to do any time travel, you have to go up into the fourth dimension, or you will have to leave your physical body, and you can go backward and forward in time from higher dimensions. But you can't be so attached to your physical body when you do that, because as soon as you land in a physical body, it puts you down in a physical body. It puts you down in a space, a single location, and it puts you down in a certain time as well. And then your options become very limited, limited to one. So if you know how to work it, you can go down to body, and then at night you leave. Almost everybody leaves their body, or you could astral travel, or you could do any number of ways. But we all leave. We're designed to leave our bodies at night and when we go to sleep, our energy field expands and we get out of resistance, and we start to merge energetic fields. We meet our soul groups. We do a lot of work. The work is often accelerated at night because we have a wider portal we have more space in space-time within which to work. So it's a lot of us, especially starseeds and people who came down to really make, to really work on the planet for ascension at this time. Sometimes we can feel exhausted in the morning because our nights are just really, really, really busy. We're doing more work usually at night than we are during the day. Our options are limited to the amount of time in a waking body. So this does go to, I wanted to talk about sometimes in the middle of the day, when your energy suddenly dips down. You know how probably a lot of you have experienced this, where it's happening a lot more as these light codes come in, as we get bombarded. We just had the 1111 gateway. As we're bombarded with more and more accelerated light codes, when your physical body wants to open more up to wants to be able to receive more, or needs to, I should say it that way, when you're, because we are trying to make it's like on one level, there's no deadline, but because outside of a body, there's no space, there's no, you've got the eternal now, and there's literally no pressure whatsoever because it's all eternal, it's all spacious. But during waking hours, we have a certain amount of energy. There's a certain amount that our body can accommodate. And right now we're experiencing a total reversal of many of the things we were always conditioned to believe. Like if you work, you have to make every moment count. You should be working really, really hard toward your goals at all time. One of the things that does, if you've picked up like that kind of, which I totally was one, so I know, that kind of hyperdrive, the real driven A-type personality, it becomes, you're in your masculine energy all the time. And if you think about like a hose that has a nozzle that you can adjust it, you can adjust the spray pattern. If you tighten it and you make it, you know how you can make the nozzle, the hole smaller, and the amount of, if the amount of water pressure is the same, but the hole is smaller, you're going to get a tighter, angry kind of stream because there's a lot of pressure behind it. You could take the same amount, if you dilate that and you put it on shower mode, you're going to get a much softer, wider stream that's open, expansive, and much more gentle. Energy moves like water. And when these light codes come in, it's easier for your body to assimilate. It's a lot less painful. So if you're having a lot of body pain at the time when, like during the solar flares, the Schumann resonance spikes, or whenever there's a real big, anytime really, whenever there's a real big wave of light codes, like there have been recently, and it's going to continue. It's only going to go up from here. And it's funny because my daughter says, you always say it's the biggest one ever, the biggest wave ever. I'm like, I know. That's because they keep increasing. They're never going to go back down again. We're just going to keep picking up more and more light. If your body is carrying a lot of resistance, or you're forcing yourself to keep working because you're trying to make a deadline, or you're trying to, you have to go to work, you can often, well, that's one of the reasons why we'll experience body pain, because you've got resistance. Pay attention to wherever in your body the resistance is landing. I know that if you've got things like fibromyalgia, which I had for a really, really long time, among many other things, the pain is over your entire body. Usually that is accompanied by people who feel very apologetic about rest. They feel an apologetic for being still. They tend to drive themselves to accomplish a lot, or they tend to have very targeted goals, and that shows up as resistance in the physical body, because the light codes want to come in, but it's kind of like coming up through the if you think of density leaving. So the light codes are coming in, but the density also has to have a place to go. So if the light codes are coming in and the density is leaving through a channel that is very tight, you're meeting a lot of resistance. If you go to sleep, if you pay attention to when you need to rest, like moment to moment. I wanted to talk about why you may be experiencing very sudden energy dips in the middle of the day. Usually, and there's a reason for it. That's your body telling you you're getting overloaded by energy. We need to get more through faster than you're allowing it to go. So if you take yourself completely out of apology, go lie down immediately, it will often appear as one of the things that happens, I've noticed before in my own life, before I have sessions with somebody, if somebody books a private session, my energy and theirs kind of meet in the astral realm first, and they start to mingle. And I can usually ahead of the meeting, I'll pick up data. I'll kind of a little bit know what it's about already. I'll know what we're working on. I can sense their energy, and my energy starts to kind of interact with theirs ahead of time. But sometimes it's interesting because so we'll set a time for an appointment. Flexible. I've learned to not set specific appointments. We aim for a specific time, and then we pencil it in and we put parentheses around it, because if it needs to be adjusted, there's a real good reason it needs to be adjusted. But usually what happens is that as the time approaches, this is the same reason that it's hard to pinpoint live streams. It lands when it lands. I can aim, but as you prioritize. Don't prioritize the time. Don't prioritize the small thing. Prioritize the energy and the way it needs to move. Otherwise, you're in resistance. You need to prioritize the way it's flowing and stay in flow in order to create the appropriate movement and make yourself the appropriate vessel, so that you can both bring in and deliver the correct data. Sometimes right before I will have a meeting with someone, my energy will suddenly go down really sharply. Like it'll be like if I'm in an elevator and suddenly it drops down 2 floors, and I'm like, okay, that means I'm hitting a lot of resistance, and our energy is not entirely merged yet. It's not going to flow properly. That's my clue to go lay down immediately, because information wants to come through, and I'm in a place where there's resistance someplace. So either I'm resisting it, or actually it's probably more, usually I work with people whose energy, their ability to carry energy they're usually in more density than I am. And so there's a mismatch. And if a mismatch shows up, what I need to do is, because I'm not going to try and control somebody else, but I will go lie down immediately and say, I have to postpone the session. I'm working on your energy, but it's going to be easier to do if I'm out of resistance and I don't try to align it. If you try to align something and force the alignment, it's like trying to force 2 magnets together when they still have tension between them. Really, you're going to have to wait until one of them turns around and then they can merge. You want a firm connection that's going to actually function. So if you're feeling resistance, you need to don't stop forcing it. Just get out of resistance and allow the thing to rotate, and then it's going to merge. So I will go and lie down. So I miss a lot of exact appointments, but when we do meet, it's harmonious and it meshes really well. So that's that. So I was going to talk about, I have I have a story to tell you that I almost wasn't going to say, because I thought a lot about it before I was going to tell the story, but I really think it has a lot of value. It's not, I would like you to hear it with, I'm telling you, because I would like you to hear it the way I'm intending it, which is with ears of through ears of compassion. It's as much, I want to tell you a story about someone else and a difficulty I had with them, but it's a difficulty that I had with them. It's not, so I was in a place of real misunderstanding. And it has to do with levels of density. And there's a reason I'm passing this information on. There's a reason I'm passing it on. Because this story kept popping up in my head. And I wanted to talk to you about why certain things, because this is, it's not just that it's cropping up in my life. If I'm prompted to tell you, it's because it applies to a lot of you as well. And I actually really think this is a very valuable story. I found it hugely valuable the other day because I arrived at a real epiphany, huge epiphany. And it changed my whole perception of the entire situation, which I've been thinking about now for about 3-4 years. Did you ever have an interaction with someone which is so frustrating that you keep going back to that exchange, and there are two reasons, one of two reasons, and that's such a gross generalization, but in my experience, we've all had these experiences where, like we always think back to like what something that our father said, and it pisses me off, and we still can't ever remember, we can't forget that thing that they did. There are usually two main reasons in my experience why that happens. And if you watch one of them, if you watched What the Bleep Do We Know, it's a phenomenal movie. It's been out for quite some time, but if you haven't seen it, I really recommend it. It talks about this a bit. When you keep attracting the same experience over and over and over, and also your mind tends to go, or maybe you'll see people like this, where they keep, it's like they don't like something, but they keep going back to it over and over and over, even though all they do is bitch about it. Sometimes when we do that, it's because the chemical that gets produced in our brain from that interaction is something that, for whatever reason, either we were brought up to it, but we get a chemical hit in our brain that we are somehow addicted to. So whenever we start to get depleted, we will almost manifest it by default, where we'll think back to that thing that pissed us off. If you're addicted to anger. So for example, this isn't the example I was going to use, but like, I know my father would do that when I was growing up. Out of the blue, for no reason whatsoever, he would just get really enraged at me and want to he would find some reason to target me, and he would call everybody he would know, and whether he talked to me or not, and he would talk about me and complain about me, but never talk to me directly. And I learned to really not take it personally, because there was something in his brain that it's like you become addicted to complaining or feeling outraged. So in his case, there's kind of like moral indignation, like, could you believe what they did? There are people who are kind of addicted to certain things. I remember noticing this in a woman who worked at a thrift store, People's Place, and she hated it. And she volunteered there constantly, and then she would come home, and I don't mean my mother-in-law, I mean somebody else. For those of you who are watching her in my family, no, I'm not talking about Ellen. It was somebody different. But then she would come back and tell everybody how awful the poor people were. And can you believe they wanted toiletries? And I said, you're only allowed to have one. And I remember thinking, you only go there for a hit of condescension. That's why you're not going there because you're actually invested in helping the poor. You're there for a hit of condescension because you really like feeling superior and controlling all the people who are smaller than you. And that's why she went. So there's a chemical that it's craving a hit of the whatever the thing is. So that's one reason sometimes we can get caught up in repeatedly thinking of scenarios or stories or times when people treated us badly. But then there's this other thing. So I had an experience with a woman who was my business partner for a while, and I found her incredibly frustrating. She's probably the most frustrating person I've ever met in my life. And I've known her for a long time. And one interesting thing, it taught me so much. What you doing, kid? About a lot of things. For one thing, she was diabetic, and diabetics tend to they crave maternal love. That's one of the root causes of diabetes, is they really have a strong craving for love, but they also reject it simultaneously. There's a massive problem usually with craving sweetness, wanting love so much, but also being incredibly hostile and pushing away maternal affection, or they can't receive appropriately. So it was interesting to me when we first started working together that, and I really did not understand this at all. It was so puzzling that she kept giving me enormous quantities of sugar. And now I feel kind of stupid that I didn't see it before, why this happened. Because it goes specifically to the delivery of resources, because I'm always looking at living systems and the earth. My general mission is about, at this time, is about creating living systems overall. And how do you get the one thing that needs to get to this person? So she was a perfect example in my life as regarding density and things that can't get through. And that's exactly the purpose I'm so grateful. That's the purpose she was serving in my life. She was probably the single most negative person I've ever met in my life. It was very difficult, humongous challenge to work with her. Where she couldn't think of a positive shot, but it's almost like she couldn't tell the difference between a negative thought and a positive thought. Every single thing that went to her was immediately perceived as being bad or a blockage or something like that. It was a really interesting thing to work with. And I'm actually, at this point, I'm very grateful for it, for the experience, because it taught me so much. But she kept giving me and my daughter huge quantities of sugar. And I didn't understand why. There was one time she accidentally came home with a bag of sugar, and she kept I didn't eat it. But she was really kind of obsessed. Like, I don't know how I got this 5-pound bag of sugar. I've got to get that to you. And I said, really, it's not important. I don't need sugar. And I've got some. Don't just throw it out or keep it or whatever. It's not that big a deal. And but it really took on she was kind of fixated that she had to give me this 5-pound bag of sugar, which somehow she wound up with. And eventually she gave it to me, but it took her like a month. And she kept giving my daughter and I large quantities of sugar, unasked for, and I couldn't figure out what was happening. So this goes to I couldn't make the connection. Now I think I could see it a lot clearer. Why is this person, I didn't make the connection that she was diabetic and she was giving me sugar. She was trying to give me sugar, and I was saying, I don't want this sugar. There was a point one time out of the blue where she she went to the bakery and she bought me a cake, and she bought my daughter several trays of frosted pastry. And she said it's for Calico and her friends, which on the surface that's kind of nice, but it's also the kind of thing like I'm a single woman with one daughter. There's no way if you want to get us a pastry, that's very kind, thanks, but we don't need all of this. What are we going to do with it? It's just an overwhelming amount of sugar. I didn't get the message. So now I understand that what was trying to get, I really missed it. Now I recognize that it's the abundance system that is directly tied to the ability to the food supply and the financial system, and where is it getting stuck? So the place that the thing that I kept going back to in my mind, which I was dismissing. So here's the thing. I kept dismissing this thought. I was having this thought. Periodically, I had an exchange with her once that was so frustrating to me. I couldn't stand it. I just wanted to scream and throttle her. I found her very, very slow mentally, incredibly slow. And have you ever worked with someone where you're trying to be polite, but your patience is also at an end? And this has been going on for way too long. And God, I want to work with anybody but you. It was like that. So I had this experience with her once where we were just talking, and she said, you know those chocolates, and they're like round and flat, and they have little white dots on them? And I said, yeah, they're called non-parielles. And she said, you know what I mean? They're like round and they're flat and they're like this big. And I said, yeah, they're called non-parielles. What about them? And she said, do you know what I'm talking about? They come in different sizes, and there's like dark chocolate, and then they have the little white dots. And I said, yes. I'm thinking she's maybe looking for some. And I said, if you go to Adams, they sell them at the chocolate counter. They have great big ones. If you want, I've seen them. You can go to Adams, and they're in a jar on the top of the display case, and that's where they sell them. Or you can buy them at the movie theater. If you go to the movie theater, they sell them. They're called snow caps. They come in a box. And she said, do you know what I mean? They're like round. And I said, yes, they're called non-parielles. And she said, well, I don't know what the name is. And I just wanted to fucking throttle her. I talk about a trigger. I was like, I have never met anybody what do you want? Why aren't you getting this? What the hell? So it was that experience. So we stopped being business partners, and that's a good thing, right? Because we really weren't it was very frustrating. And on both sides, we were both very frustrated working together. Because I was always saying, let's go, let's go. Show up. And with her, it was like any excuse to stop. And I was just enormously frustrated. So we're talking about different levels of density. But that exchange with her in the non-parielles, I kept periodically that particular conversation kept coming up in my mind, and I would feel the frustration afresh. So what I thought it was, and I was like, and I remember thinking, why isn't she getting it? Why isn't she getting it? It goes directly to the distribution of resources. Why isn't she getting it? What is the holdup? Knowing that her purpose in the, she's also from the Joan of Arc lifetime, her purpose in the network, her purpose in the group that I went down with, her purpose was to be kind of the boulder at the bottom that represents density. And I know that in working with her, the purpose of it was that as kind of a model of the issue that we were dealing with, where if you can get this person to get it, if you can get through this person, there's going to be a miracle, because if this person can get it, anybody can get it. And that's why, just from just a tactical standpoint, I know that if I can solve this exact problem, it's kind of like it's a microcosm of the problem. I know that if I can look at this and if I can figure this thing out, I know that I can it's like the hub of a wheel which is blocked. And if we can just get past this arterial blockage and get everything moving through here, we will have solved the whole problem. So I kept going back to this exchange, going, why? Because she didn't want to eat them. So what was the purpose? And what I kept trying to bat it out of my head, like, stop thinking about that. You just want a hit of, I don't want to be addicted to the feeling of frustration or the feeling of anger or the feeling whatever. I would like to move forward and stop thinking about it. But then the other reason why sometimes something will crop up in your head, that is it because it really does need to be examined. And spirit, and if we're talking about spiritual communication, spirit will show you something over and over and over and over and over until you get it. So if you're still not getting it, they're going to present it in a myriad of forms or the same form. So if you've got a repeating thought in your head, it's not always something that you need to look away from. You really have to examine both sides. What is it actually? Am I really kind of getting off on the fact that she was stupid? Am I looking down on her and is it an aspect of me that wants to feel superior over someone that is like a moron, let's say? Or what is it? But be honest with yourself and like really examine, what am I feeling? What is coming up for me? And I did that with myself. And I was really as honest as I could. And I was hugely frustrated that I was not able to I wasn't able I wasn't able to get through, and I never did get through. I still didn't understand it. So everything is your mirror. And I also knew that something's not getting through to me. And when we talk about the world, the entire world is your mirror. I was talking to Camille about this the other day, Camille Ochoa. It's a window. So you're looking out at everything, and it's like looking through a window, but it's also a mirror, and every single thing is an aspect of you. The thing that makes a pane of glass a mirror is that there's darkness. It's opaque. So it's right where the glass, the transparency, is backed by darkness. That's when you can see yourself. That's the thing that creates the mirror. And it's knowing how to view every circumstance as it's showing you something that you don't see about yourself. So it's kind of like God was trying to show me something and was equally frustrated that like you're not seeing it, you're not getting it. There's something in there that you're not getting. And here I was very frustrated with her that she wasn't, and that really was the problem in our relationship altogether. I was actually trying to be kind one time. I remember saying to someone in her defense, I said, well, none of her gifts are cerebral, which is true. Stupidest person I ever worked with, just dumb as a post. But none of her gifts were cerebral. Doesn't mean she doesn't have gifts. She has gifts, but none of them were particularly cerebral in her case. Not everybody is a genius. Doesn't mean they're worthless. She had a lot of value in other areas, but you can't expect her to have the gift that she doesn't have. That's why somebody else in the team is designed to, be the countermeasure to that. At any rate, I was looking over that problem and thinking, what is it about this? What am I not getting? What am I not getting? And then the other day, I should say that in looking at my own behavior, I could see that the thing that I was looking at it from the perspective of, I actually genuinely still want to solve this problem. I want to solve this issue and figure out why I can't get through, because what is the holdup? And what is this trying to show me? Because I know it's relative to the supply of resources and the fact that it's the distribution of sugar, the distribution of food, the distribution of money, the distribution of, she's also Cancer, so it's the distribution of water, the distribution of its emotional flow. It's tied to so many things that I kept thinking, if I can just solve this one problem. So sometimes I thought, in my case, it's that Spirit is still bringing this up into my mind, so that until I actually get the message, the message is going to go away when it no longer has anything to teach you. If you've learned if you've gotten the message, then you're not going to be thinking about this anymore. For real. It's going to go away and you're going to be on to the next thing. But I still wasn't there. I was still thinking, what the hell? Why was she so stupid? Why didn't this work? I don't understand. It's a non-parielle. I just told you what the name is. What the fuck? So then I was thinking about the issues of diabetes, which I've been thinking about a lot. Diabetes, the way it's, when I triangulate data in terms of every force evolves a form, I'm looking at the way different groups are interacting through space-time. I'm looking at the way things are triangulated in industries. So the pharmaceutical industry, the fact that diabetes and the price of insulin skyrocketing, people taking advantage, or companies taking advantage of needy populations. So I was looking at that too. And I was the one who didn't make the connection right away as to why this thing showed up in my life and was such a thing. Why was she always trying to get me the sugar when I didn't want it? Why was it always huge quantities of sugar that she was trying to give me? She was trying to give me the thing that she needs, that she's unable to regulate on her own. She's actually trying to provide the answer. You know how? It's kind of like out of the mouths of babes come gems. Sometimes when people are really at an unconscious, unawakened state, that's when they reveal the most. Totally. You have to really know what state they're at. I know I've made this mistake a lot, or I did previously, much more so than I do now. When somebody would say something from an unconscious state, when they're still a sleeper, and they haven't even started waking up yet, but something would come out of their mouth and I would see something that it meant, like, oh, I totally get that. And I thought that they knew what it meant too. And so I was going off of the assumption that they knew what I knew. And I remember this woman saying that to me one time. She said, you always assume I know what I have this information that you have. And that's true. I did think so. And that's one of the things that happens as we go up in density, or as we go out of density. We start to work with telepathic populations at distances, and the information exchange is lightning fast. And we also merge in soul groups. There's a lot of co-dreaming. Everybody gets the information simultaneously. And so it's a safe assumption that the people in your soul group are in sync with you. They're supposed to be, and all of those soul groups work together, and there's very little delay. There's just very little delay. And if there is a delay, we all catch up every night when we go to sleep, which is why we start dreaming in groups, collaborative dreaming. It's where individuation starts to meet pluralism. So I was going back to this exchange with the non-parielles, and I was so frustrated. And then the other day, I was walking around my kitchen. It was raining, and you know when you're not thinking about it, all of a sudden it just kind of blasted into my head, and I went, "Ow!" Now I get it. I suddenly got it, and it was like a flash of amazing grace. Like, oh, I was blind, and now I see. Suddenly, something got through. I realized that she's talking to me about the best way to reach her. So she can't, she was trying to give me sugar because that's what she needs. The way, so I was going to talk about the food supply and the way food cravings are working. It's a very extensive subject. It also goes to psych meds. When you start to heal for other people, the way you do it changes depending on what level of density you're in. We start to clear for other people. And the properties that food has are as important as the nutritional qualities. So if you're living in a realm where you're just aware of the physical realm as being the physical realm, and you don't really pay any attention, you're not aware of your energy body, or your intuition's not online, none of that stuff's working, you tend to look at the physical world like that's all there is. So you're gonna you might go to a nutritionist, or somebody who's going to counsel you about your diet. You're going to look at the physical properties of food and maybe count calories, or you're going to say this is bad for me, this is good for me. But actually, as we lose density, the energetic properties that a food carries, the frequencies and also the properties it has, start to be more and more important, because more of our own space is being taken up. We're becoming more spacious. We're taking on a much broader energetic field. And so if 2 of our strands of DNA are physical and 10 are energetic, you have to start looking at the energetic qualities that food has as being absolutely of equal value. She needed the qualities that sugar has. She was searching for connection too. And as frustrated as I was at that I was unable to get her to connect, she was searching for connection too. Sugar is sticky. The reason bees are fed sugar and they produce sugar, and they fly so they have a role in ascension that we're trying to emulate. We're trying to use the properties of bees, the way like it's a little bit like hive mind, but it's more like a friendly Borg. It's not the Borg. The Borg is kind of on Star Trek: The Next Generation. The Borg was a hive mind race, and that's where like resistance is futile was their catchphrase. It was like a very invasive species, and they go and they assimilate other populations. That's absolutely true, but in that case, it was seen through a very masculine lens, and the Borg the ship was a cube, and it had a queen, it had the Borg queen. It's a version, like everyone sees things through their own lens. The Borg was a depiction of kind of the feminine hive mind via the lens of masculine fear and a control structure, which is what the Federation is, right? Also, bees don't actually like to be kept in boxes. They prefer to be kept in natural shapes. They will accommodate, they will build a shape that's a hexagon, and it would benefit the honey if you're going to get actually different honey energetically if you keep it in something that is not a box, because they don't naturally do that. At any rate, the woman with the non-parielles, what she needed was connection. When bees fly, when they swarm, they go in a group the same way swallows will go in a murmuration and they stay in a big blob. They're connected. They're connected on an energetic level, and they've got one mind. They need that connection. Honey produces the connection energetically. And when you have a whole bunch of people in the who are disconnected from maternal love, it produces diabetes. And it's interesting that that they can't accept sugar. So she was giving me the answer to the question I had, but I was the one who failed to make the connection that she was giving me the way to reach her. She was giving me the answer. This is how you reach me. So if we are connected energetically, I can eat what she needs and she will get the energy of it. Because if she were to if she's diabetic, as she is, if she were to eat that quantity of sugar, her body would reject it. She'd go into shock and she'd die. So she's really rejecting that. And so somebody else is going to have to do that for her because she legitimately can't do it. So she was giving me what she needed. And I was looking at it like, I don't want sugar. I don't want that many calories. I don't want to have to, she gave my daughter probably for Christmas. She said, I couldn't think of anything else to give her for Christmas except candy. So that's what she said. And I was like, what kind of a logical imagination. She gave my daughter like 4 pounds of orange slices for Christmas. And as a mother, I thought, Calico was like 10 or something. I was like, oh my God, what did you give her that for? Can't you give her something that a mother would want their child to have? You gave her mass quantities of sugar and that does nothing for, our life together. But there was, it was interesting though, because what is that trying to show me? Why is she led to think that's the only thing she can think of? That's the only thing I could think to give this child. And I was the one who missed the connection. What is that trying to show me? Because our whole thing was like getting resources to the people who need it. So in the overall network right now, we have people eating for other people. And you wouldn't think that would be possible, but we're feeding the network where I will ask someone to connect with another person. For example, and I don't think he minds if I say it, Tomer Jindik is clearing. He's doing a phenomenal job. He's the steward of a very tough group of intransigent, I shouldn't say it that way. The newly awakening masculine collective, but he's located in Israel. So there's a huge amount of fighting. He's got a difficult group that he's working with. There's really struggling. It's very combative, the energy that he's working. And so when we go down into the grid system, we are a part of the moving grid. And we go down into an area where we connect with the land, and we use ourselves kind of as, those of us who did this work, as channels, like vent pipes. And we will pick up energy from the land. We'll use all our tricks, and we'll program crystals, and we'll treat the water, and we'll do all sorts of energetic wizardry to get the energy running in a more positive direction, and often purged. We just need to be purged. So as we do that, and also as we connect with other people who are doing that similarly, we're helping them clear for their area, because none of this happens in isolation. Those of us who are hubs are now joining with other major hubs. Nobody's really working in isolation anymore. So it's the energetic rivers. The groups are joining with other groups, And we're able now to pick up information, data, and also share the burden of some populations which have been still very problematic. For example, Israel. So as you pick up energy from the ground, you run it through your body, and it produces physical symptoms because every force evolves a form. So as you pick up energy of war, you might feel yourself in a place of hostility, or as you're purging. So we're connecting. When people come to me, I look at the energy that's running through the body. I will connect them with other people who either have something in common, so that no burden is shared alone. And I also connect people who have kind of the inverse wave, who have the ability to do something that you can't do. And then we create a circuit that balances out. So somebody who can't sleep will be partnered with somebody who can sleep, but they also might be partnered with somebody else who's having sleep problems. So the idea is to create kind of a balanced web of assistance, so that no burden is shared alone, so that you have somebody who's going through the same thing you are. We're also working with connecting natural systems, and then we will apply carefully, maybe not all at once. We will gradually bring the ailing systems back online. The burden has to be shared, the workload has to be shared. Sometimes you can take somebody's burden completely and you'll get like a total miracle healing. And other times, people have to learn to also pick up their share of the burden. So a lot of times people, for example, want a total miracle cure, but they actually haven't learned the lesson from the illness yet. Sometimes the illness is there to teach you something, or an injury is going to produce something. It's going to produce a realization, or it's going to allow you to remember what you went through, so that you can then become a healer. It's there for a reason. And if you don't get a chance to bypass, well, I suppose you do get a chance to bypass the knowledge, the lesson. If you bypass one lesson, you're going to meet the same lesson over and over and over again until you get it. So the other day I had this fantastic experience where I found myself thinking about this thing with my past business partner and the non-parielles. Like, God, why didn't that work? Why didn't she get it? And then I suddenly realized that it was teaching me that it was tied to the food supply and sugar, and that if I ate mass quantities of sugar and sent her that energy. So first I thought it was about me being sweet to her, which began to feel very inauthentic, since I was not feeling sweet. I was tremendously frustrated. I didn't think she wasn't picking up enough of the workload. Have you ever been in those kind of partnerships where you're doing 90% of the work and somebody else is complaining constantly and doing 10%? It was like that, where I was really gung-ho, and she was also telling me a lot of stuff that wasn't true. And I started building up a lot of resentment, like, I can't continue to do this. It produces, so that's going to happen every single time. That's also there for a purpose. Every time there's a change in density levels, where one person is growing really a lot and one person is stuck right where they are. If any pair, a marriage or a business partnership or any union at all, if their growth rates are not really compatible, it can only go on for so long. And one is going to stay, the slow one is going to stay in density. And so it's kind of like if, in any partnership, if you think about going forward as two wheels, picture a wheelbarrow with two wheels. If one wheel is very small and one wheel is really large, the one little wheel is going to be spinning a lot faster, but you're not going to be able to go in a straight line that way. It's going to wind up looping around. So eventually the big wheel is going to cut the little one off. It can only happen for so long. that you maintain imbalance to such a degree. It's allowed it's designed that way to give the small one a certain amount of time to up level, and maybe, but it's only going to go on for a certain margin of time before that becomes unsustainable. And so partnerships break off, and trying to maintain that after that time has passed, it's kind of like, Calto and I had this discussion last night. If you really need to expand, if it's time for you to grow and you really need to expand, it's incredibly unhealthy. It's kind of like Chinese foot binding, or, deciding that you want your baby to be a toddler. So you put them in a box and you don't ever allow, there's going to be a point where that's going to produce a death because you didn't allow for the expansion. You have to allow for the expansion. Hang on a second. And you also have to meet people where they are. So there's a constant, a rotating. The groups are designed to rotate, and people usually come in and out of alignment with each other. Sometimes you separate for a twin flame union works this way. You'll separate for a time to go off and work on your respective things, and maybe you'll come back together and see if it's in alignment this time. Hang on a minute. Wait a second. This is not even the thing I came on to talk about. I was going to talk about something else. Okay, I'm going to change the subject. It's important to, in addressing the issues of the financial system right now, the financial system, the abundance system, all systems now, part of the correction is taking credit where it's due, giving credit where it's due, even if it's to you. Everything starts with us and our own integrity. So it's going to be very important. A lot of us have been taught to deflect compliments, but and I don't really like the word compliment, but credit, appropriate credit. If you actually have an asset or actually have an ability, I would ask you to own it, really own it. Take the credit where credit is due. It's going to help flip the entire energetic distribution system. The abundance system is directly tied to the ecology and the economy. It's not just about money. It's also about the ability to see one's own assets and claim them. Claim the assets that you have, and then be resourceful for them too. Here's the thing. So the group that many starseeds, there are a lot of groups, and a lot of them are in my group too, who have a history in the Catholic Church or one formalized religion or another, where we were taught, conditioned that it was better to give than to receive. We have and we praise the Virgin Mary, and she can't receive from anything from the ground, right? Or physical, particularly anything that's physical and male. There is a conditioned response to automatically reject that. And because we're also false modesty, any place where somebody gives you a compliment. So if somebody gives you a compliment, and it's just like, I don't like flattery at all. But if somebody says you've got this asset, you actually have this asset, this is your gift, you have a gift. You're not going to get further gifts before you appreciate the gifts that you have. I want you to really listen to that, because it's directly tied to the economy. It's directly tied to the way that we are able to receive money. If you have to appreciate fully. So that means you make more. When you appreciate something, you make more. When money appreciates, it gets added to. You have to appreciate the gifts that are already yours before you're going to be the recipient of additional gifts. So you have to do a real, this totally begins with transparency and honesty. Be really honest about the gifts that you already have that are not necessarily tangible, material. They could be, they might be, but your talents, your any wisdom that you've gained, before things come back to you, like even our past life gifts, as we go further out of our individual life right now, our past life abilities, anything that you actually earned. I don't mean your past inheritance, like, like if you used to be a lord and you used to have a a large estate, that kind of thing is transient, because the earth actually belongs to all of us. But if there's a skill set that you learned, like I'm always saying that I really wish that I want my ability to play the piano or the organ or the violin. I don't really care so much about the violin, but I really love the piano, and I was really, really, really good at that. When I get out, there's going to be a point when our past life abilities, all our past life gifts that we earned, our earnings are going to come back to us. And as soon as we get out of the aspect of a limitation, one of the first things that starts to come back in the process of awakening are your past life memories. Because all of that is actually yours. The wisdom that you gained from this experience, all of that ancestral wisdom, whatever you worked for, you're going to be getting that back. But you're not going to be getting that back if you're in a place of being pinched and you're not appreciating what you have now. So wherever the hell you are, you might have certain things going against you. You might be in a place of lack or resistance, or focusing too much on whatever the experience of limitation, which is what the third dimension is. You're going to have to get out of that while still being embodied. But it's a matter of changing your entire conception, changing your whole perception. Your mind's going to open up. And then you become open to pluralism. So if you go back to the non-parielles, what that is, those things? They're flat discs that are fatty and dark and chocolate. And they're black. They're very dark brown, dark chocolate. And they have a high concentration of fat. They're opaque. They're chocolate, which is grounding. So as if you say every force evolves a form, if you think about that, it's lateral, a flat circle. So it's a feminine shape that's basically one-dimensional, or it's flat. And everything about that, it's low-lying. So it represents the third dimension. And in this case, it kind of represents her, not able to really gain a lot of loft right now, because you're sitting in a place of kind of bitterness, thinking a lot about sugar. But on top of that is pluralism. So you have one singular dense thing that's very dark, and right at the intersection of that are all of these little white balls. Have you ever seen a non-parielle? It's a black thing. It's covered with all of these little white dots. So it's like where singularity meets pluralism. And she was giving me the answer to the problem. And at that intersection where those things meet, that's the source of the problem. And I had actually given the answer to myself, but I didn't even realize it. I said, you can go to atoms and they're really big. They're on the counter. They have really big ones. They are usually about this size of a quarter, but they come in all these different sizes. And if you go to the movie theater, think about that for a minute. you get them in a box, and there are lots of them, and they're called snow caps. And they're also a little pointier. And they're called snow caps. So there's a temperature, there's an indication of temperature, and there's also, that's where you go to receive light codes on a much bigger scale. So it's all about third dimension fame, and right at the intersection of light and darkness, that's what we're talking about. And that's why she needed them. And I was frustrated that she didn't get it. But what I should have done is go out. I recognized the problem, go out and get them. And if she can't eat them, I should eat them. Because during the time that we were connected, if she's unable to eat sugar, but I can't expect her to do it, since it'll kill her. But it's okay for, like, I know that it's not going to kill me. I know that I can actually put myself in that situation and get myself out of it. And I will have been able to roll the entire problem, the entire obstacle over. There's a timeline bleed through. So to go back to what I was saying early in the beginning, there's an aspect of healing that's coming online now, which is not the way things used to be. During the times of war, during the times of dualism, we had a very singular notion where it was kind of like, this is my body, this is my terrain, and I'm going to protect it at all costs. And then you want to kick people out of it to preserve your boundaries. My guide said something very interesting to me the other day. I've been thinking about it ever since. They said, have you proved to your own satisfaction that you are capable of maintaining a boundary when you're in the presence of what would be considered the enemy? Can you hold your light and take it into darkness and be totally unaffected, and remain unaffected by what other people want, what other people think the energetic influences? Are you able to maintain your own integrity no matter what the circumstance? That's really what it's about. Can you maintain that while still interacting? Because it's very easy to maintain your integrity when you're up against no opposition whatsoever. You're in an insulated environment. You like your peaceful space, and you want to keep a peaceful space, so you use an external boundary, and you just keep yourself inside the castle walls, and you never let anybody in, and you're peaceful. But it's kind of an artificial peace because you're never actually tested. It's very easy to maintain peace when you're surrounded by everyone who agrees with you. You never have to actually argue your point. You're never confronted by anything that's difficult. So you're never actually tested to see how strong you are, or to see if you actually have integrity, or are you relying on some sort of artificial form of it? Like where everybody tells you you're always right. So you think you are right. But very often, if you were put in among a population and everybody thought the opposite thing, would you actually still agree? It's just a different kind of test. My guide said, have you proven at this point, to your own satisfaction, that you can maintain a boundary and maintain your authenticity no matter who you're around? So yes, I said I would. And they said, okay, so maybe it's time to test interacting with places that you find threatening. So what is the threat really? If you have authenticity and you have an ability to maintain your authenticity no matter where you go, is it time for you to walk into quote unquote enemy territory? And not to change them, but just, are you ready to have a more open life, or a more are you ready to step into expansive, or do you still need to be locked in a 1-bedroom apartment? They're saying to me, can you risk an interaction with an enemy without freaking out. That, without freaking out. Without automatically rejecting. There's an aspect of sacrificing the virgin element, not completely, but the sacrificing of the virgin element of, as you step into expansion, you go into soul groups, you begin to get interpenetration of energies, which for people who are not accustomed to it can feel very threatening, especially early on. It really can. People are, when we're conditioned to believe that our thoughts are our own, we don't necessarily realize that sometimes the thoughts that are coming into our head, we're listening, not necessarily thinking our own thought. We might be picking up on the thoughts of other people around us, or somebody is thinking about us and thinking a certain thing, and we think that it's our own thought. We believe it. While we're in physical bodies in the third dimension, there's often the perception that nobody knows what we're thinking. And especially people in the third dimension feel very threatened by often. I don't want to say that it's unilaterally true. And I also want to say that there's, it's also a really glorious way to live. And there's very often the perception of threat where there is no threat. There is no threat. We're no threat to you whatsoever. But they see it through their own lens. And so they freak out and they assume judgment because they themselves are judgmental. And they assume that somebody is coming in to get them, where that's not actually what it is. Resistance is futile. The ascension of the planet is taking place. And you can learn to adapt. There are ways to do that. But also, there are also ways to maintain your privacy. But often, a lot of species don't do that because we just think in group mind, and whatever you think is open for other people to see, or other, telepaths or whatever. It's just open, and there's no reason for shame because we don't even think about it. But we're right at this precipice, there's a wrong word, right at this intersection between linearity, stepping into pluralism, and it's a crosswalk, or it's an intersection that a lot of people find very, very threatening. It's scary. It feels very unstable to those they didn't know it existed. A lot of people are coming online now, and for the first time, and they don't know what telepathy is. They don't understand that there are many different kinds of languages where they're moving from the perception of linear language and written language, which is all linear. The reason that tools like tarot cards, and let's use tarot cards as an example. Tarot cards or oracle cards or cards altogether. The reason every force evolves a form, right? So why do so many people in physicality, if they're going up, if they're seeking, it's like one end of the bridge, right? They're seeking a way to expand into spirituality and intuition. And one of the many tools that it's very common to use are cards as a means of accessing telepathy. So telepathy is moving pictures, moving imagery, and right at the intersection of linearity. So if a book is linear, if this is a book and it's linear because it's all written text and it goes in one direction, and you read it you read it sequentially, and you can't take this apart. It goes in one direction from beginning to end, right? it's a solid. Part of it is flexible and part of it is bound. That's what books do. And when you read from, at least in our culture, you read from left to right, so it goes in one direction, and it has, I don't want to say it's one interpretation, but it's basically it's a linear form, and it takes this form. So books are more linear than cards are. Cards, they might include text, but it's a bridge. It's a bridge object between it's like a step into, it's a step toward non-linearity from a book. A book is more linear and more structured than tarot cards are. Tarot cards are designed to incorporate, or oracle cards are designed to incorporate movement and action. Personal action of the individual is required. Your participation is required. So it's less, this is more, I mean, it's still, your participation is required, but less of it. Like when you sit and read, usually you sit and read. It's more, there's less movement usually. Maybe just your eyes are going, but there's less movement. There's more movement when you use cards, because now you've got two things and you're interacting. And it's also a rotation. So it's a circular movement. Whoop, and sometimes things go flying. And I'm just shuffling, but it incorporates movement. It incorporates circular movement. It incorporates the data comes down in a slightly different way every time. And it's also pictures. It's pictorial imagery that comes out a little bit differently every time. And it's a way of adjusting, going from kind of the security of having something like a reference book, which is a little more secure, a little more stable. It's asking you to partner with it, but very little. It basically has its own identity, and it only goes in one direction. And it stays the same way every time. If I go back to this book, the numbers and the pages haven't changed. This is going to be different every time. So it's training you to be more proactive, to be more circular, to kind of engage in learning interpretations, how to make connections. It's training your mind to seek information a different way, and also be proactive about it. Put it into a circular format. Start thinking in pictures. It's training you toward telepathy. So it's training you into the ability to speak with animals. If you are to, over time, you'll be able to put down the cards and just read with objects, and you'll be able to kind of put down any linear link or any, you'll get your own messages from the cards, or the way they are shuffled, that has meaning that isn't necessarily in the book. If I'm shuffling and a card shoots out and it hits the lamp, it means something different to me than if it hits the floor, or if it lands in a spread, for example. But people usually, as they leave linearity, they look for side rails. They want some sort of stability because they're scared. They're still in a certain amount of fear. So we're trying to give them the tools that they need. You meet people where they are. It's another reason that that you give crystals to people who are in a place of being very attached to the physical world, and they're scared. They don't want to lose it. And we're not saying that you have to lose it. You're just being asked to expand, right? You want to give them a way of maintaining, a way of feeling safe enough to explore, where it's not a threat to them, where they feel safe enough to explore, so that information can get to them. You meet your people where they are. You meet your population where they are. So you have to know where they are. And then you give them whatever tools they need. And if they can't, if you have a diabetic who really, really needs the properties of sugar, find a way to get those properties, which are very sticky and connective, We need more of that in the network altogether. So regarding our changing diets, as you are moving energy, as you're clearing, you're probably going to start to clear for a lot of your ancestry, or if once your own ancestral lineage and your own personal lineage is cleared, many of you will start to clear for people in your environment. Anybody you sleep next to, you're going to start to pick up their ancestral stuff, or people that a lot of the rules of healing modalities change as you go up in strata. Many of us, hang on. Many of us, if we've been told as healers when we started learning modalities to not take on other people's stuff. As you go up in strata, it becomes only a collective, and you take on other people's stuff all the time. It's par for the course. It's automatic. There's just a constant exchange. So if one person comes into the network, if there's a network of, if there's a group of, I don't know, it seems pointless to count, but let's just say 15 healers, and we add another person to the network and they have a terrible backache, everybody in the network is going to get a minor backache for about 2 hours or something like that. We'll pick up a little bit, and the person who had the ailment, they're going to say, my God, my back feels totally better, feels so much better now. It's a miracle cure. And we know that we just took we took that density and we shared the burden, and everybody experienced it, but it really just wasn't that bad. And it was like no big deal at all. And, you feel better. That's happening now with groups. So the more people get clear, the more we clear for others. And then it's a little bit like a vacuum. You can just go to the density, you can touch down on it, and it's no threat whatsoever. Because we're not really carrying any resistance to it. You want to make sure that you do that with care so that you don't overload the system. You have to kind of, yeah. Well, I guess that's that. You have to do it with care so you don't overload the system. Regarding the properties of food, I can look at someone and say, if you need to be more grounded, eat organic peanut butter. It's different. You're going to have a different response to peanut butter than you will from like sunflower butter. I was hospitalized for a while, and I was out of my body for 10 days, and I couldn't get back in. And the reason I couldn't get back, which I would have been able to get back in fine if I had been left alone to my own devices, it would have been fine. Because I do this kind of work all the time where I leave my body, I kind of leave it running, and I go do some work out of body, and then I return to my form. Like several years ago, so I was talking to people about the one area of interest. I work with a lot of people. We're working with the psychiatric industry, and the whole population on pharmaceutical drugs for quote unquote psychiatric illnesses, and what those drugs, what those medications actually do, and why they can totally kill you. No wonder people can't get out of psych wards. The current medical establishment, I shouldn't say it that way, I should say the powers that were in the previous medical establishment, the Western medical establishment, in the third dimensional paradigm as it has been, doesn't recognize the energy body, and they have no idea what the hell they're doing. And the more they adhere to those standard protocols, the worse things get for their patients. And now you've got psych wards that are, so that kind of thing is going to get a lot worse for, as people now go through their awakening process and are diagnosed by probably well-meaning professionals, but they have no idea what they're actually doing. And they will say, oh, you're hallucinating, you're hearing voices. That's not right. we're going to get you the help. So take this medication and it's going to do this for you. It's going to jam you back into a box. So basically, if you're trying to grow out of your body, and you have to, because it is time, there's a spiritual adolescence too, just like there's and there's a planetary adolescence too. So there's no stopping this thing. You can't say, I've decided you're going to remain prepubescent. Everything has a process of appropriate maturation. And just like there's physical maturation and physical adolescence, there's also spiritual adolescence. And we are going through that on a planetary level. So expansion of the physical form, there are all sorts of changes that are happening and that are appropriate. And nothing is actually wrong. It has to be given space to develop, and someone has to walk through the process with the ones who are terrified that all of a sudden they see visions and they never saw that before, or they're hearing voices and they're like, oh my God, am I going crazy? So many people think they're going crazy, or they're getting wild mood swings, huge depression. They're called things like bipolar because they're shooting up, they're getting mania, and they're crashing back down again. And that is the product of an energetic waveform. It's an energetic waveform, which depending on how much you're carrying is going to shoot you really high up, and it's going to crash you down to the bottom. There's a way to level that out. And if you take, I'm not a doctor, please don't sue me. If you go on pharmaceutical drugs, the drugs do what, they have a particular effect where they're going to, my friend who's a doctor, and also knows quite a bit about psych wards, she calls it chemical incarceration. It's going to prevent your energy body, your energy field, from having the necessary movement it needs to survive. So you can actually totally kill yourself that way. It produces massive energetic distortion. And depending on what your ancestry is, what your history is, you can cause way more problems for yourself than you need to if you had an energy healer simply open up the channel or assist you in some way. That's actually a part of a totally different lecture. I would like to spend a whole live stream on it at some point. But I wanted to talk about dietary changes. When I went into a psych ward for 10 days, I was told, and I felt fine. I was in the middle of my workday as far as I was concerned. And an ambulance came to get me. And this was several years ago. And somebody had said that I was acting funny, and I was very nonlinear is what I was. I had left my body with intent. I had left my body, and I was acting normal in the middle of my workday building energetic circuitry, which is what I do. And I rely on various foods or things or substances to assist me in getting back into my physical form. So hematite will ground you, peanut butter will ground you. Certain things will allow you to find your own energetic frequency again. And I needed my own space, and I would have been absolutely fine. Somebody was worried, and they said, do you mind just coming with us? Basically, it was a total lie. But they gave me a shot. And I wasn't yelling. I wasn't out of control. I wasn't doing anything. I just noticed that this nurse put a syringe in her pocket. And I said, I don't want that. I do not consent. And at some point, somebody gave me a shot. And I woke up hours later in a totally dark room, freezing cold, wrapped in a blanket and strapped to a gurney. And this is probably, I don't know, maybe 3 years. I'm not sure how long. Several years ago, 2.5. But it was around this time of year. And it's when the veils open, right? At around the end of October, there's a wide portal where we have access to the highest So I was in my element and I was busy. And they put me in the psych ward. And I was unable, because of the medication that they gave me. And they also, I couldn't get back into my body. And I knew what the problem was. And I was there looking and thinking, I can't, my body's there and I'm above it and I can't get back in because you've given me medication against my will and it's preventing me from getting back in. It was really a problem. And I didn't have any of the things that they wouldn't let me have my phone. They wouldn't let me have anything. They wouldn't let me have anything. They said that I wasn't allowed to have peanut butter. I asked for organic peanut butter. And they said, no, you can have, if you want something, you can have sun butter. But anybody who knows about the energetic properties of food, peanut butter grows underground. So if you ask any indigenous population or anyone who talks to animals, you don't necessarily need to memorize the properties of every last thing. You don't have to memorize it in a linear way. You can look at something and know exactly what it does by the shape of the leaf and the color of the flower. And you've got all this information just because every force evolves a form. And if something is growing underground and it's a nut and it's shaped the way it is, it tells you what it does. And I needed something that did that. And instead they said, no, we're not allowed to serve peanut butter because of some protocol. But if you want, they thought that I wanted some sort of like a mouth craving. Like they thought that I was after, that I wanted some sort of seed or nut butter for nutritional reasons. And it was energetic nutritional reasons though. And they kept giving me sunflower butter, which grows in the air. So if it's not going to help me get myself back down grounded, it's going to actually, if anything, it's going to make you, hover about yay high. It's not a good idea. It was tremendously difficult. And the other interesting thing is that while I was there, though, I knew that I was there for a reason. And I had to go through, like so many of you, if you're, I know Bilal did it too. He went through the legal system and went into the prison system and had to come back out. All of these experiences by those of us who are doing work at a certain level, we go into the corrupted systems because we need to experience firsthand or see it. And the system is tested with our energy to see how it behaves, to see what distortions are there. And then we can see what the problems are, and then we're going to be able to correct them. One thing I noticed when I was in the psych ward was that misdiagnoses, man. If somebody is talking to their dead relatives, I can see their dead relatives too. So there was this one man who was speaking Polish. Like I can communicate telepathically with him. I don't speak Polish, but I know that he's talking to his father, and I can even kind of feel what they're talking about. But I know he's not crazy. And we also, a lot of empaths, you know how this happens if you're an empath, where if you touch a surface or if you touch an object, if you've ever gone into an antique store, you go in there with a lot of care. If you're a hyper empath, if you touch an object and you get a backwash, it's kind of like if you're a wet washcloth and you touch ink and all of a sudden it's running up your arm. All of a sudden we pick up all of these vibrations and backstories, and you know who had it before, and you know how they felt, and you get all of this ancestral it's a tsunami. It's like falling into a porta potty, depending on who they were. And if you get, you pick up a child's doll, you might not get such a bad feeling. But depending on what you pick up, furniture can be haunted for sure. You go into the psych ward, and they've never done any energetic clearing in there forever, man. It's been like, I don't know how long the psych ward's been open, but they don't light a lot of sage. They're really not doing a lot of sound healing or anything to clear out the place. So you've got these massive distortions and hostilities and things that are pent up on the surfaces. And it was very interesting because my doctor said, I notice you're cringing, you don't want to touch anything. And she asked me if I was like OCD, or are you afraid that you're going to get germs? And I said, no, I'm not fucking afraid of germs. And then they call you hostile. Like, I'm not afraid of germs. It has nothing whatsoever to do with germs. I know I'm not going to get ill. I'm not afraid of germs, but I don't want to touch any of this crap because you pick up energetic residue, and then you've got it. And then I've got that on top of everything else. And I just want to go home and I want to take a salt bath so I can get all this crap off me. I recognize certain things in the system that this is the reason I was watching not only my own circumstance, but kind of watching what what was happening with other people, the way they were treated, and like thinking, well, I know what I would do as an energy healer. I know I would put that person under a tree because they're very ungrounded. And if you put them under a tree, have them walk barefoot on the ground. They need to sit in a, walk through a stream. There were no animals there. Like, no wonder none of the empaths can get back into their bodies. We're all, a lot of us are ungrounded, but you've got these massive distortions of energetic blasts that were coming out of certain people, like eruptions of anger from like a couple of the men. And then you would see the orderlies come and jump them and drag them back into a room and lock them in there. And I was thinking, holy crap, you need some nature. This is not what you do, dude. But they don't listen to me because I'm crazy, right? And you've been diagnosed, then they put you in a box. The one thing I did notice about the psychiatric meds that they put you on, so I'm not on anything now. And it took me a while to, I got off as soon as I left the psych ward. I was like, I'm not taking this at all. At all. But they had put me at just for the 10 days that I was in there. They put me on risperidone, which is an anti-hallucinant. It's for people who say they have visions. They call them hallucinations. And I know that I've always been, I can see interdimensionally. I can see the energy coming from the stupid doctor. I can tell what you ate for breakfast. I know what your mood is. Get me out of here. But I'm a threat to no one. But I was, as someone who's been clairvoyant, clairaudient, telepathic my entire life, cutting down somebody's senses, somebody's clear senses when they are clairsentient, is no different from asking somebody who has 5 physical senses to walk around with a blindfold for your comfort. I don't want you to see something, so I'm going to put a blindfold on you. And that's better for me. No. I suddenly could, because of the medication, I know this is why, but I'm actually really glad I had this experience now, because now I know what it does. You know how. So watching energy move, for those of you who don't see it, and it's not better or worse either. It's not better to have a skill or not to have a skill. We all have different gifts. Some people can see energy moving and not everybody can. It doesn't mean you're less spiritual. So, who was it? I think it was Steve Rother, who's, God, that man is phenomenal, phenomenally accurate. For though he channels the group, and you can't say he's not without, he has no spiritual gifts. Tremendously gifted. And he said one time, he told me that he can't pick up energies from crystals. He said everybody, says that crystals are so great. And he's like, to me, it's just a rock. I don't feel it. His gifts lie in other areas. It doesn't mean he's not gifted. But for those of you who don't see energy moving, some of us can see energy in the air moving, and it contains data. And depending on the way it moves, like sometimes I will see flashes of light when people talk, or flashes of light on objects, and the quality of the light has meaning. So if it glows, it means remember this for later. It means remember this object placed right here. Remember what you're doing right now. it contains data. You're going to need this for later. That's all really valuable information given the task that I have to do in this lifetime. I'm not crazy. I speak light language. It means certain things to me. I was born knowing it. For those of you who don't see energy on a regular basis, you may have had something like it. Have you ever looked at pavement and watched heat rising from pavement, where it's just kind of, it's like a layer on top where it gets a little blurry, and usually there's a little bit of a current. You can see it moving and it's directional. That's heat rising from pavement. It's a change in temperature. It gives you data about the nature of the energy that's there and the direction it's going. I notice. So when I'm interacting with objects and plants and animals and people, the energy that's around them, their auric field, is giving me information about their ailments, their moods, their sometimes their ancestry, sometimes how they can be reached, very often how they can't be reached, what's blocked, what's open, things like that. And one thing I noticed when I went into the psych ward and they gave me the medication, this is what stopped, where all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, the energy around people was still. And I was like I almost couldn't, it was like I suddenly couldn't recognize energetic signatures, or I suddenly couldn't. It would be a lot like if you are looking at a movie of a waterfall, and you know, because of the way because of the picture of a waterfall, you know that the water's coming down. And then if you imagine that was put on, not pause, but kind of a moving pause, like it was I don't even know how to explain it. It's like instead of coming down like this, it stopped in place, and it was just going like this instead. It was like suddenly it stopped time, and it was like on one frame, and it was just going like this, where there was no longer any more flow. It stopped the flow. It was like the life flow wasn't going when I was on this medication. And I could see the energy around people, but it no longer had any movement. And the movement is half the data. Like that's what stopped. Like all of a sudden it's static. Or I don't mean static like static field, because that has a lot of movement in it. I mean static like it was still, which told me nothing. And all of a sudden I couldn't tell if people were lying or telling the truth. Although I kind of felt like they were lying, but like it interfered with all of the data exchange, and I didn't want to touch, like they just felt like they were all liars. So they would call me paranoid, but really there's a whole wealth of information that they're not getting any of it. They were saying that I was much better on the medication. But really what I think it was is that I was suddenly in a bandwidth that they felt more comfortable with, because it was suddenly quiet. But it wasn't like I was manic before. I wasn't. I was running a lot of energy, but that's because that's where my job is. I was running a lot of energy because I run a lot of energy. But I'm not crazy. It was a horrendously frustrating experience. And then I was also thinking, well, no wonder none of your people get out of here. I met a woman in there. She's been living there for 6 years. She used to be a model. Somebody came and got her one day, and she's been unable to get out. She has no advocate. She has no rights. She has no job. She has no ability to get herself a lawyer. And I met a lot of people in there. I think there were only a couple of people who said they checked themselves in. Yeah. But most people were brought there against their will, and then they couldn't get out, and they couldn't even get an advocate because their phones were confiscated. A lot of people didn't get visitors. So I was lucky I was only in there 10 days, and I also knew why. I knew why I was there, which really helped the experience. I was kind of, I don't know, like, it helped that there was a purpose to it. But it was also interesting that they also had a mistake, and because nothing's random. Nothing's random. Speaking of diabetes, they had me confused with another patient while I was in there, and they kept checking my blood sugar. So it's also one thing that you're not allowed to protest. You're not allowed to protest any of your treatment. So you can't say, I don't want my medication, and I don't want an injection. They kept checking my blood sugar, and I said, why the hell are you checking my blood sugar all the time? And they said, well, it says here you're diabetic. I'm like, who the hell's record do you have? I'm not diabetic. And they also wouldn't believe me because they thought, well, like, you're out of your mind, you're hallucinating or whatever. You don't have any concept of reality. My reality was totally different. I grant you that. But that's because I'm sane and I know perfectly well I'm not diabetic. And then a couple of days later, so I was there like halfway through my visit, one of the doctors came in and said, for some reason, we had you listed as a diabetic, but you're not a diabetic. And I said, I know. I told you that. You didn't believe me. And nobody's believing me, but I'm telling you the truth. I want to go home. Anyway, yeah, when I went in there, I wound up getting, for lack of a better term, picking up a lot of like, I don't know, like entities, parasites. You know, those of us who are energy healers, we know how this stuff actually happens. You can get entities who latch on, who can see you as a food source and siphon. They're negative aliens and all sorts of things. And this wasn't really a thing I was going to talk about, but I know that I was there for a purpose. And that is yet another group that really needs some liberation. When we talk about working to liberate people, one thing that bothers me a lot, I understand it, so I'm not really down on it, but it bothers me sometimes in the Ascension community to hear a lot of people say, no one is coming to save you, which I think is a bunch of crap. That's exactly why we're all here. Earth did need help. We're disengaging or eliminating the savior model where there is a singular figure, often a white male, who comes on and does the whole thing on your behalf or for you. But there is a time and a place for assisting somebody when they're genuinely in a place where they can't do the thing that you're asking them to do. There has been genuine oppression on this planet. So you can't expect you can only expect people to work up to their capacity with the tools that they actually have. You can't expect them to do more than that. You can offer them the tools and then expect them to apply it. But then you have to know what needs to happen. And you can't imprison someone and ask them to also free themselves if you put them in a porta potty. They're not going to come out clean. They're going to come out dirtier than when they went in. Yeah, there are very specific effects that the psych meds produce. One of them being if you take yourself off or if you wean yourself off a lot of the psych meds, it makes people very prone to suicide. Why? There's an imbalance of it. So part of the highs and the lows, it has to do with in the process of ascension. And this is the same thing I said the other day when I said if you're sleeping with a partner who is in a place of a lot more density than you are, and you're very expansive, you're at night, your energy field expands and it wants to move at a far faster rate. And the density wants to go down into compression. And those two things and it's kind of like the higher one is trying to pull away and then gets yanked back. That produces the looping effect that so many of us complain about. There's a lot of us that complain about that. we don't want to get stuck in the looping pattern again. But the looping pattern happens right at the juncture. So right as you start to head into fourth, these aren't actually places, but it is it's in the fourth dimension, right at the juncture of the third dimensional construct, which is very fixed, and the fourth dimensional construct where time starts to move in both directions. And you start to get kind of a triangular effect where it looks a little bit like a piece of pizza with a spiral on the top, where you're trying to get out and you kind of start to get free and you go into expansion, and then you tend to get yanked back in, but your soul is craving more, an expanded experience that is stable, that is also stable. You want like more permanence, permanent expansion. We're in this place now where those two things are vying for dominance. So when we're talking about the two main timelines, the two main groups, there's one group that is they're fixed much more strongly they're adhering to the third dimensional timeline where everything is predictable and things go one after the other, and this is the way things are done, and we're going to maintain that. We're going to obey the founding fathers and go forward in a linear manner. And then the fourth dimensional construct, we're trying to birth a new reality. We are birthing a new reality. We're manifesting it. And the rules are all different. Disengaging from the third dimensional one, the third dimensional people are it's like having one foot stuck in cement or tar or something, more like tar. And they're they don't like to let go easy. That's the problem. And there's also a certain amount of, I feel this too. There's a certain amount of regret that goes along, and regret and sadness of leaving certain things behind when you know you have to. And there's a lot of resistance and regret. And a lot of it is sad to leave people behind when we know that that's their genuine path, but we really do have to wish them authenticity. We wish you authenticity. And I wish that the same thing that I wish for myself. I wish myself authenticity. I'm not trying to make you up your mind for you, but I'm also not going to stay in a reality that is really treating me like garbage, where we can't live down there, just like we can't breathe tar. We can't breathe tar. We can't breathe water necessarily either. We can live in water, though, and breathe air. There's a way to do it. But we're building a semi-solid, but actually much, much, much more sustainable and a stable environment. It feels uncertain. It's like being on water. It feels, if you're coming from land or from a pier, it feels uncertain. When you go into water, there's suddenly a lot more, it's a lot more flexible all the time. Fluid, it's fluid. And to some people, that feels very destabilizing and frightening. And when they get frightened, they contract back into fear. And as soon as you go into fear, you're in a place of greater density, so you tend to sink, and that's how you don't swim. So we're at this position as a society now where some groups are vying. There's also a certain amount of vying for individuation. There is a way to still maintain your authenticity. Well, that's how you do it. But you have to be able to step away from a group identity. If you have a very strong identity as that's very tied to a group, like Joan of Arc, it's simultaneously a group and a singular identity, on behalf of France. So you pick up this entire identity of this nation, and you're kind of a patron saint of this big group that's also a fixed plot of land. It's like one gigantic ego, but it's also a group, which was necessary for that time because we were trying to preserve a certain amount of individuation, but also a certain group identity. So it's appropriate to do. You can still have group identities. it doesn't mean the earth turns into one gigantic undifferentiated blob. There's still going to be individual preferences, but what we're trying to do is get every being on the planet, let's say every human, it's really every being, but let's say every human, we're trying to get every human being to have 12 strands lit of all their DNA lit. So they're going to have 2 strands of physical DNA, which, but 10 strands of energetic DNA. And all of those are going to be lit and online. So we're not going to be carbon based anymore. We're going to be, we're going to have the capacity to flow generous, copious amounts of light and exchange it all around. And everything becomes transparent. Everything becomes transparent. It's glorious. It's really a nice way to live. But you don't have to go if you don't want to. Nobody does. Let's see. How are we doing on time? That's not that bad. I've only gone 2 hours. The group mind intro, where we start where individuation starts to meet the quantum field, back to the non-parielles, where singularity meets the quantum field. That's what she needed. That was the intersection that we were at. And the best way to reach her, my old business partner, was through food. It's directly tied to the food supply. And if I had been feeding her, if I had fed that instead of gotten annoyed, we would have had potentially a different outcome. It doesn't have to be a separation. You could nourish something from a distance. You can work remotely, energetically, and make sure that person gets what they need. But it's interesting, as soon as I became less hostile, as soon as the other day when I kind of was walking around the kitchen and I suddenly realized what that message was. And it was me who hadn't received it. My whole frame of mind changed from one of resentment. Why doesn't she get it? Something's wrong with her. Hyper-aggressive fault finding. I have understanding for why I felt that way, and I was justified also. Working with her was very frustrating, but I was in a place of resisting her and thinking, God, keep that thing away from me. I hope I never have to work with you again. My own perspective totally turned to one of forgiveness. And that was the opening of the channel. So as soon as I got the message, I reached forgiveness in my heart. That was the miracle. I received a miracle of forgiveness, and I got out of all resistance, and I finally let that entire thing go. And now I'm ready for a new experience. So that's a really beautiful lesson. I'm so glad it happened. Yeah. And yeah, told you a very long story. There is a certain thing about timing and natural cycles where certain things have been working legitimately, like way too slow. Like everything does have natural cycles, like breathing, and there's only so long. The closer you are linked to biology, the more there is a time-dependent biological imperative where you can't just take all the time you want to make a decision or not breathe. You can't just say, well, I'm not ready. You have to really, when you're a wise steward of a living thing, you have to acknowledge when it's time for this thing to go to the bathroom, when it's time for, you can't, part of the urgency that is felt in the lower dimensions, what the more particular part of the urgency that's been felt in the awakening community, particularly a lot of it has to do with the financial system too, where people haven't been getting the resources they need in time, where you can't just withhold resources because you're lazy or because you don't feel like doing it. When something is in your care, you have to care for it in a timely manner, and that's just the way it is. there have been some very hard choices. Let me rephrase that. There have been some very regrettable but firm choices that have been made recently, where we had to cut some people out of systems where they were just being plain obdurate, or they weren't getting any place where you weren't getting a message in time, or knew about something and chose not to take action, either from wanting to control or just because there wasn't any urgency on your part, like I'm comfortable. And yes, that person's child their head is underwater, but I have enough oxygen, so I'm just going to sit here and not act with any undue haste. I'm going to take my time, and I don't know, and I don't feel, or whatever. They just don't feel any. They think that there's been a certain group that felt that they had all the time in the world, and if they just maintained their ground, held their ground, that nothing bad's ever going to happen, and I'm in control, and I don't have to do anything I don't want to do. There was a wheel in place. There was a cycle of care that was not observed, and sacred contracts were I don't want to say broken. They were broken. They were walked away from. But there's only those people who did that have been removed from the system, and they're being placed elsewhere. Sometimes that happens and it happens even to nice people, where they got the message, but they didn't take action fast enough, or they didn't care enough, fast enough. It wasn't of any urgency to them, so they let things die when they had every single thing. They were often given, or they were given, the means to address certain issues that was actually their job to do, and they didn't do it. So now they are being removed from power. We've already done it. We've put the circuitry in place where they're going to be totally cut off. And a lot of them are not going to see it coming, because there was just no action taken. And some of that is regrettable, and also, I might say, really surprising to me, because they seemed more caring than they were. And they also said there were a lot of promises made too. That if it was up to me, I would fix this problem. But you had the means to do it, and you chose to keep the money instead of pass it on. And those people are being. It's not up to me. This isn't something that I'm controlling. I'm just simply aware of the information that we're not going to have this anymore, because there are spiritual tests that we go through to see what kind of person we actually are, as opposed to how we present ourselves. And if you might present yourself as a very loving, kind person, and you want everyone to believe the image that you put on social media, but there does come a time when you're given the opportunity to not necessarily prove it publicly, but prove it. You're going to be given an opportunity to do what you said you were going to do, what you said you wanted to do. You've been drawing this to you. You always said you wanted to be a philanthropist or whatever. And then when we give you this, what did you do? We are often asked to not prove ourselves to see if we deserve something. You don't have to prove your worth. You have to know your worth and step into your purpose. And then as you do it more and more, you're going to get more and more to do it with. So if you want to be in a position of philanthropy, for example, and you wish you could solve the housing crisis, and you wish you could start a school, and if you only had enough money to do it with, do you do it when you have nothing? If something is genuinely yours, you're going to do it regardless of whether you do it on a large, you're going to do it with what, because it's an extension of what you already are and what you do. So you're going to serve your purpose one way or another. So what direction are you rolling? There are some people who are healers, for example, and they have the opportunity to heal by sending the energy out and healing others by sending loving energy out and applying healing to somebody so they can help heal themselves. If your energy is running backwards, you will take on the ailments of other people, and you yourself will just get incredibly ill. Over and over and over and over and over, and you can never get well. And if you turn that energy outward and you start serving, and you serve your divine purpose as a healer, but you're sending it out instead of pulling all the illness in, you're going to be a healer either way. I knew a healer who would, she was incredibly sick all the time, incredibly sick, and constantly. And she would heal from one thing, and she'd get 5 more ailments. I noticed that I could walk through, like Walmart or someplace with her, and she would be picking up everybody else's crap. I like, not on purpose, but she didn't know she wasn't know where she did it. She would pass somebody with, psoriasis, and the next day she'd have psoriasis. And she was constantly getting other people's illnesses. And that's one example where, since so that would be appropriate if the entire network were running. We can, as long as we can keep that in a circulation with enough of us, we can just, it's like laying on hands. You're just going to change it. You see that person as well. You can take their ailment off, or you can let them have it. But one way, whether you send the energy this way or that way, miracle cures happen all the time, but you also really have to believe it's possible. You have to believe that it absolutely happens. And then you have to be a willing participant and not committed to doom and gloom and glum. And I will say about miracle cures, if you go to like someone like Benny Hinn or one of the big faith healers, where, have you ever been to one of those where it is very, very charismatic? I happen to really love it. I've been to a bunch of them where I also went through the John of God protocol 6 times. And he saved my life too. And I always want to talk about that. I don't know if I'm going to do it today. I'm already at 2 hours. But if you've ever gone to a Benny Hinn concert event where the stadium is filled with really highly charged energy. So if you're like me, I get off on that. I love that shit. It's really exciting. And it also really works. It really does. It exists in 2 places simultaneously. Like, it can go in either direction. And this is why John of God, there was a long good spell, and then there's a lot of darkness there too, because light and darkness always move in both directions. So when you go to one of these great big events, the potential is there. A lot of huge energy on both sides. There's a lot of illness, a lot of darkness, a lot of pent up physical manifestations of some nasty gunk, ancestral karma that manifests in a physical form. A lot of people with cancer or, physical manifestations of things that was never dealt with. So there's dark energy. There are entities who are there feeding on that too. It's an interesting energetic climate. But I don't mind it. I actually really like it because I'm very committed to going in the one direction. And there's a lot of love there too. You just have to decide. It's a great testing ground for those of you who have never been. You could find Benny Hinn on, and a lot of people, I'll probably get a lot of flack for that too. A lot of people would, in fact, let's do it. Let's do some of that. A lot of people will see charismatic healers like Benny Hinn, and they will, so fascinating to me how people will look at someone like that, and me too. They will look like it's at in my energy. We tend to literally trigger the crap out of people. Light irritates demons. So what comes out of you what comes up for you if you look at someone like Benny Hinn? For those of you who don't know, he's a charismatic healer in kind of like born again Catholic, born again Christian, and he fills up these humongous stadiums. People come to him for charismatic healing, where there are people who catch you when you fall, and energy shoots out his hand just like it shoots out of mine. Or if somebody who does this kind of work, where he also gets a lot of psychic impressions, and for some reason they don't blame him for being a witch, but he brings up a lot. He will feel into the energy of the same as I do with you guys when I'm listening. When I'm on live streams, I can feel your energy. And he'll say but it's interesting because he's an Indian man. I think he's Indian, and maybe not. I'm not sure where he's from, but he will say, there's someone who's got cancer, and it's cancer of the throat, and you're going to wake up to it and go be better, and you're going to feel better tomorrow. And he will when it's live, he will go like that with his hand or put his hand on your head, and then people have huge reactions and they fall back. And they have mattresses there, and they have people whose whole job it is to catch the falling people. So they don't, and then their whole place is littered with people who are lying on the floor. It's really kind of fun if you see it like that. But there are a lot of people who also go in there and they're skeptical and they're jaded and they're like, I don't believe this shit. And he's probably another devil worshiping, Christian, Catholic, the whole place is tainted. But what's coming? I just love it when people say things like that, because it just makes me laugh. What is coming out of you? Pot calling the Benny Hinn black. What's coming out of you? It is true, but light irritates demons, and that's the purpose of the healing sessions. And when we talk about demons, it's just negative consciousness that is solidifying, taking on the life force, and attaches itself to people who are vibrational match to that. So if you're a vibrational match to that, which it could take the form of an attached entity, which happens all the time, and you can't actually blame them, or sometimes they're just negative people, very negatively oriented people who died, and they're looking for anything familiar, and they look for a food source the same way we look for a food source. So you really do have to love your enemy. Doesn't mean you have to tolerate the demon or say, I welcome you in my space, you can come. No, you can say, I do not want you in my space, go over there, but I acknowledge that you do exist. And if I allow, so one of the rules of conduct, there really does have universal rules of conduct, is that you can't say that another life form may not exist. That's really not yours to do. That's God's to do. If it happens, it happens. Things do sometimes get root. Usually if a life form is actual exterminations of life form are incredibly rare. Usually there's the rule of thumb that all life has a purpose. The light is equivalent to the darkness, because in order to maintain balance, you're allowed to choose your preference, but you can't tell the other side that they may not exist. And if you do, you're saying that kind of proclamation is okay in my world. And as soon as you do, it's your own election, and they can do the same thing to you. So when Jesus says love your enemy, it's really, or just the whole principle, love your enemy. Doesn't mean you need to tolerate them in your space, but you do have to respect the right that they eat something different. Their diet is different. They feed on fear. You can choose your preference. You can help transmute as much as you can transmute, but you can't say no darkness may exist ever anywhere. You can't do that. There are places where darkness goes so that it can also live. And believe it or not, there's a purpose to it. There are some people who don't want to get out of the ghetto. There are some people who there's a reason that they're going through, you know, human trafficking or something like that. There are a lot of us who came to deliberately put ourselves into horrible experiences so that we could learn something specific, sometimes so we could hit rock bottom really hard and bounce back up and take whole populations with us. That happens all the time too. I find it really fascinating when some of the people who, again, I'm not judging. I'm really not judging this at all. Some people, I'm just aware of it. There are, I'm friends with a man who is, who was Rasputin, and I saw very clearly when I met him. He had a actually fabulously nurturing energy. Believe it or not, it was very dark, but it wasn't bad dark. He was really an imposing figure, and his energy was incredibly magnetic. It was fantastic. I felt very much at home in it. It felt like an appropriate scale for me. You know, when you wear shoes that are too tight, or you're just in a space that's just is compressing you too much, and you can't get it. It's just really uncomfortable. Like wearing shoes that are like 5 sizes too small, or like have you ever had your blood pressure taken when they use the blood pressure cuff and they're pumping up the cuff? If your whole life is like that, when there's no place for you to actually be your appropriate size, when somebody comes in with the energetic bandwidth that actually doesn't ask you to compress yourself, and it allows you to fully expand to your full natural capacity, where you're naturally just held in a. So I recognize when this man came to my house a couple of years ago, and I felt what it was like for the first time in my life to feel appropriate masculine containment. So it wasn't a sexual relationship. He's just my friend. He came over, and he had enough bandwidth and enough appropriate like male stewardship that it allowed me to actually relax and experience the feeling of safety. And I've never had that in my life, where I was always the one who had to like be on guard. Like I'm always the one who's fending for me. And it was a magnificent feeling, actually. It allowed me to be grounded, and suddenly there was enough space, and there was appropriate polarization. Appropriate polarization is really important to be fully grounded, fully embodied, and fully met. You know how it feels? Like I've almost never felt it. That's why it was so rare. It was like really shocking. But it felt suddenly stable, but not confined. It was really glorious. And he was Rasputin. And I could tell as soon as he said it, I was like, oh yeah, you were. Like, there's no doubt in my mind. It's absolutely true. But when we were talking about the Catholic Church, we were talking for some hours. And I should really call him again. He was great fun to talk to. I was really surprised too. We didn't agree on everything. And that's not what surprised me. We didn't agree on everything. And I was really surprised to hear some of his, venom that came out at Catholics, the Catholic Church. So I shouldn't, okay, let me rephrase that. I shouldn't say I'm surprised at the opinion of the darkness, which is absolutely there. Like sure, the darkness is just as dark as the light. So I'm not defending the Catholic Church as an institution. No, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not doing that. But what surprised me was that he said that I should be telling everybody what the Catholic Church did. And I was thinking, I know that's not my role. I think it's pretty damn obvious. I'll talk about it. I don't actually mind talking about it at all, but I feel that since the dark and the light exists equally, our job is to look at both, is to clearly see both sides, clearly look at the polarity, acknowledge the balance, acknowledge the appropriateness of the balance, and then say, okay, I'm going to go take this up into union, but I have a very strong preference for the light. One thing I was told, and then I'm going to pull very hard in that direction. I'm going to look at the entire system and say, what has to happen so we don't lose this entire, we don't have to lose the entire institution. I think some of it, are we going to lose the control? Yeah, well, I think we need to. But I also think it's also possible to not to lose the foundation or the lessons. We're not going to lose the lessons. I want to take the foundation that is the church and go in as a purifying agent. And you take the light into the darkness to purify it. You're going to keep the stability. You're going to keep the good portions of it. You're going to transmute the rest of it. You're going to put yourself into a process of meeting the darkness face to face and seeing what it does to you. And it's probably going to make a lot of people really mad. They're going to have to, the darkness, the process of transmutation, it puts us through the fires of hell. It really does. But we're also transformed in the process. And that does serve a purpose that's ultimately quite beneficial. We are really forged. We forge ourselves. And we become light beings. And then we can't be taken down. And then we run all of the energy of the planet through the beings that are us. We become the foundation that is going to allow this planet to become unconquerable for this time forward. Oh, that reminds me, to change the subject somewhat, I wanted to speak just a little bit. So Tara, Aaron, if you're listening, or if you listen to this later, it's a little bit far in, sorry, 2 hours and 31 minutes. I was going to talk to the artists and the creators, as speaking as someone who looks down timeless. I kind of feel like the time for that is past. We're stepping into new creation, but I have seen things about the future too. And you know how. So this is going to be interesting. I told this to Calico the other day. She was working on her paintings she's a senior in school and in high school. And she was working on some paintings. And I said, just for your information, you know how I'm not a big Doctor Who fan, but she just watched this episode where they go back and they meet Van Gogh and they take him to the future to see how valuable his paintings are, to see what he thought was worthless. What he thought was worthless, he thought he died. He was a failed artist, and we talk about mental illness, right? Like that didn't go so well. They take him forward in the future to see a retrospective of his work. He's like one of the most famous artists. I said to Calico the other day, you know how, when we look back through art history, we look at an era like the Renaissance, and there are these Renaissance masters, and almost anything from this, whether you were one of the real masters, the greatest masters, like Raphael or Michelangelo or Leonardo, or one of the lesser well-knowns, almost anything painted during the Renaissance is uber valuable. Anything that was done at that time has a certain cachet and is really sought after because it's just extremely valuable. There's not that much of it is painted during this time. And at this time, so there's a parallel between the Renaissance and our planet now. Almost anything. So now I was talking to, who was I talking about? I think it was Karen. Was it Karen Isis? Who's a fabulous artist in Thailand, and she was making quilts out of really interesting. She was making quilts out of found fabric. She lives in kind of a touristy area, and people leave T-shirts and things like that. And she goes and she takes the stuff and she recreates it and makes these creations, stitches it all together, and it's absolutely gorgeous. All of the artwork done from this period of time, this condensed period of time, similar to the Renaissance, any artwork that's done during this time on our planet is as valuable to the rest of the galaxy. All of the different, anything that was done on Earth right now, the creators are the most, they really are the most valuable, the most prestigious, the most sought after. So I said to Gallico, you're just doing your little homework right now and you're thinking it doesn't matter. But this actual little sketch that you're doing, that like you're throwing it, you're wiping, you're using it as a brush cleaner. This actually, if you put this in a different context, if this thing manages to survive this cheap little panel that you're painting on, a picture you got off Instagram, if this gets placed, if somehow manages to survive, this could be like such a valuable thing on another planet to other populations who are hyper-focused, because they really are, hyper-focused on everything that was produced at this time. The amount of excitement, because there are energies and there's a creative process happening on this planet that is unprecedented anywhere in any galaxy, in any universe ever. And it's funny because it's not that our planet is ascending, because planets ascend all the time. It's natural to most planets. Most planets ascend, or stars are born all the time. And that's not unusual at all. There are millions of them. It's just like another kid going through adolescence. Yes, it's all special to you. But it's also, everyone before you has gone through it too. So it's also not all that unique. And it's tempting sometimes to think that this planet is like the center of the universe or super special, but it actually is. We're actually we're a living library, and there are circumstances on this planet at this time that are different, like way by a lot, unparalleled and unprecedented any place ever. So all of the attention, a lot of attention that's why so many starseeds are here. That doesn't usually happen. Usually on various other systems and planets, there's basically one or, you don't get a huge variety of species. You really don't. That's why you can say things like Arcturians are blue, or, there's still there's an array, but you can say this species looks like this. But there are a whole bunch of hybrids also. But on Earth, the circumstance is so it's unique, and it's unparalleled and unprecedented. And the work that is done by visual artists, creative types during this period is already, how you can travel into the future and you can see the past. Those of us who do time travel, we can see the effects, and then we can go back to participate in it. And that's what's happening now. All the artwork that you're doing now is potentially some of the most valuable in all universes. It was done on Earth right now, right during Ascension, which is a fairly narrow window. It seems to us like going through it seems like, my God, is that thing ever going to end? It seems like what's taking so long. On one hand, we feel like what's taking so long. And on the other hand, in terms of cosmic events, it's a fairly narrow window. It's a big blast of light. And the fact that you're producing a piece of artwork, it's incredibly valued, incredibly valuable, and sought after. So don't knock your contribution. Yeah, I just want you to know how important we're all considered masters to even be here at all. All right. What else? Honor sudden cravings. If you have any sudden cravings for bizarre foods, no matter how strange it is, as you step up into group healing, group consciousness, we're creating a network. And sometimes, so we're trying to apply the inverse wave. Cravings are going to come up for food, water, weird substances. You're feeling often, as we step up into new levels of empathy, and we're running large amounts of energy that isn't necessarily our own. You start, and we're also getting more empathic. So you'll suddenly have a craving for a cigarette but you don't smoke. I've never smoked in my life, and I remember one time, years ago though. But I remember one time, I was totally shocked. I was doing something, and all of a sudden, I just looked up and I said, "Shut up, where's my cigarette?" And then I was like, what the hell was that? Like, something just flew in and just kind of came out my mouth and left. That was weird. I always remembered it. And I was like, I swear to God, I've never smoked in my life. This is one reason, interesting. This is one reason why all of the systems, the medical system is going to come down and change totally. We're not going to need it at all. The legal system is also going to be completely different because the people that are in the bodies are no longer the people that did it. Everything is being totally washed, totally redone. We're not going to be evidence-based anymore. We're not going to be evident. We're not going to look for proof because it hasn't happened yet. We're going to create something and watch it land, and it's going to be the evidence of our manifestation, but we're creating a new world. We're not looking behind us for evidence that, scientists are the last ones to know anything. By the time, it means that they've suddenly discovered something that everybody else already knew. Like, it already happened. Go forward into the future and create the life that you want. Be open to all possibilities, and we're all co-creating this in a very telepathic, mutually harmonious network that is growing by leaps and bounds. It's growing very much like a coral reef, actually. Quite a bit. It's quite a bit like a coral reef. Where these, or like mycelium, like, tendrils, we're reaching out and finding like attracts like. So if you find yourself repeatedly thinking of someone, chances are they're thinking of you too. So maybe reach out. It may not be something that you're supposed to necessarily cut off. You know how in the past we were all told to cut our cords? That's also true. You're not going to support something that doesn't support you. If it's really not in your best interest, you do need to cut it off. You do. Or that doesn't mean expel it, and that doesn't mean they're garbage either. It's just not for you at this time. Allow everything that wants to come, and everything that wants to go. And you're going to wind up with the people who match the authentic you. But staying in your own authenticity is incredibly important. It's more important than ever before. So for the people pleasers, people around you will ultimately be pleased after a short period of upheaval. People around you will ultimately benefit, for real, by you staying in your own authentic nature, recognizing your own value, and then you're going to be a vibrational match to everyone else who values you, who sees your value also. That's the way we're working the networks. So don't try to people please other people. People will be pleased, but a lot of the people who don't value you for what you actually are going to fall away. They are. And that's going to benefit you enormously. But it's almost like it's never been more important for every person to know their own worth. Recognize your gifts. You must recognize and appreciate your own gifts before you're given any further gifts. If you're not taking care of what you already have, you're not going to be given additional to work with. So what does that mean? You tell me. What does it mean for the way you're treating your body? What does it mean if you're constantly dismissing your gifts and saying, I'm nothing? I don't know, I'm nothing, I'm just, I'm not saying be an egomaniac, but chances are, if you're worried about getting too egotistical, that's not the error that you're falling into. You're probably not going to err on that side. It's more common for most light workers, even though, yes, the ego can be tricky. But when you say you're nothing, or when you say, no, I'm just not, if you're not claiming your gifts, they're not going to be yours anymore. You have to claim what's actually yours. You have to honor yourself, honor what's actually yours, honor what you earned, claim it, appreciate it. Treat yourself the way you set the standard of care. So that's really important going forward in the Abundance Network. You set the standard of care for what is appropriate. You tell people the appropriate way to treat you. So if you're constantly dismissing yourself, dismissing your own gifts, hiding. This is why I say don't hide your light under a bushel. When I have sessions with people, one of the first things I always say is, to what percentage? For real, ask yourself. It doesn't matter to me. I'm asking you to find out for yourself. To what degree are you in the closet with your spouse, with your family? Do they know what you really are? Do they know what you really think? Are you afraid of what they're going to think of you? Are you afraid they're going to retaliate? Are you afraid they're going to cut off your support, which is a really huge, big one? What will they say about me? Are you afraid that your reputation will be lost? Are you prioritizing other people's opinion of you over the gifts that you actually have? You need to say that you're important before other people will recognize your value. And you're going to set, don't lower your standard. Don't lower your standard. That's another thing my guides kept saying. Raise your standard. That also goes back to Joan of Arc. You carried a standard with Jesus Maria. So it's a divine counterpart. It's not always romantic, but it's a masculine, feminine counterpart. Raise your standard and set it high so other people can find you. You're going to step up into service, but that doesn't mean you're going to step necessarily, you're going to step forward and into expansion, but you want something that matches you. One of the things I say all the time is meet me where I am in flow and lift me up where I best fit. Thank you, so be it. Put me where I best fit. Lift me up where I'm going to be most appropriately positioned for the optimal benefit of all people, so that I get the lessons I need, so that I can serve the purpose I'm here to serve, so that it's going to temper me. It's going to have me go through the whole process that I said I was here to do. And now what? I don't even know what my next step is. I really hope I'm going to be moving from this place and going someplace else. But until you appreciate where you are, you can't get anything else either. So even if you're living in a garbage can, you have to appreciate why. What am I here for? What am I supposed to be learning from this? Not like a victim, like like when is this lesson going to be over? We all feel that way. But like, what is this doing for me? It's doing something for you, or you wouldn't be there. You're getting something from it. The faster you can figure out what that area of horrible irritation, what is it here to teach me? What am I not getting from this? Help me. So I say this to my guides all the time. And it's not also the thing with my business partner. It's not like I didn't ask. I've been asking for years. What am I not getting about this? If something is still occurring in your life and it won't go away, rather than simply getting frustrated and saying, God, this thing's a piece of crap. I hate that thing. Go away. I don't want this anymore. I've blocked you as much as I can block you. Stop trying to ignore it and start listening to what it's trying to teach you. There's something there for you. As soon as you get it, then it'll go away. And then you could it's not that it's going to necessarily depart. you're just going to come into a different relationship with the irritation. And it's going to teach you, it's going to allow you to step into a place of forgiveness. And then you're going to see where that goes. It might lead you someplace unexpected. Out of hyper-aggressive fault finding, which is a very, very slippery slope. You have to see the darkness. You have to see the darkness, be able to speak about it honestly, but then also not choose to live there. Say, okay, I see this. I am calling it out. But now that I'm looking at this thing, I'm going to choose the light side. What is the most noble thing I could possibly do with this right now? With the data that I've got, with this crappy situation that nobody likes, yes, the Catholic Church, yes, they've been doing this for a long time. The circumstances is such that it does this. Now what? From that position, what are you going to do with it now? It's equally dark and light, and both are going hog wild. Which side do you pick? It's going to come up probably very abruptly. Which one do you want? And what about you? Where do you stand on this issue? And then you have to decide. Do you want to remain in fight mode? Do you want to keep battling, fighting for justice? Or do you just want to say, you know, I'm going to let you have that. I'm going to let you just take whatever the hell you want, take it over there. I'm leaving, and I'm connected to enough. I'm going to choose the light. I'm choosing personal secession, and I'm going to make my energetic imprint over here. I'm going to align myself with this. I'm going to align myself with the light side if that's what you pick. Also, there's nothing necessarily wrong with shadow, because a lot of people, there are different kinds of shadow. There's darkness that's evil. We don't necessarily want that, but there's also shadow that's restful. And shadow does serve a purpose. It serves a really important purpose. It's not only darkness is different from evil. Shadow also serves, and shadow is also needed. So there's appropriate nurture shadow, which is like sleep, or like lessons that are there to teach you, and you get out of resistance to that. When you get out of resistance to that, then you can find union between the dark and the light, and then you have union, and you're no longer at 50% optimal. You can operate in. So we're also fixing the circadian rhythms. It's amazing how many complaints I've been getting from people, or similar complaints of their circadian rhythms are really screwed up right now, in the light worker community, in the starseed community, the ascension community, I guess. One of the first things that's going are what we were conditioned to think of as the natural circadian rhythms, where you're awake in the day and you sleep at night. A lot of times, because of the light codes are coming in so much, we have to drop into sleep instantly. Get out of resistance, go to sleep, take a nap in the middle of the day. It will be most productive for you, because light codes are trying to come through. Just put your body down and let them come through. Let it go through you. You're going to actually get way more accomplished that way. By being passive, you have to go into the feminine state immediately and receive the light codes. The darkness and the shadow and the sleep is the feminine state. It's the place of rest. So put yourself there. Allow yourself to receive as much as is needed. And I ask you to do that with no shame and no apology. We're also getting rid, in doing that, we're also getting rid of, we're undoing millennia of misogyny. Any place that there was misogyny, where the person who's sitting down not doing is shamed. The person who's receiving has often historically been shamed for not working hard enough. There are, and I'm not saying don't get up and do your work. You do need to get up and do your work too. There is a balance, and you have to do that. And partnerships won't stay together if one person is doing everything and one person is resting. But there was also times where that was appropriate. There are certain karmic contracts where if somebody didn't take care of somebody in like a previous life, when karma was still running, and we're getting out of that now, but when karma was still running, sometimes you would have you would have a soul contract where there was one person who's incapacitated and there's one partner who has to work and work and work to care for this person because they have to learn how to do it. Because at some point they didn't care for that person and they might be coming back and have a certain number of years where they have to care for this person who's unable to care for themselves. There's a lesson there. So don't just bitch about it. Everything serves a purpose. What is it there to teach you? What else? Yeah, when you go into receivership, it's incredibly important to do so with no shame. We're trying to honor the divine feminine, and we're trying to receive more. So if we're doing it with apology or there's a tremendous amount of resistance to receiving. I'm just noticing it. It's one of the things that I'm working a lot with. One of the reasons, there are many. One of the reasons where I was told by my guides that you're going to gain 50 pounds and it's part of your job. It's not going to be with you forever. You're just going to do this. You're going to do this thing. Women, it's everybody, but it's also largely women. So I've been working with the energy of the women as a group, hyper focusing on numbers and amounts of weight. When you focus your attention, especially as a group collectively, oh my God, when we focus our attention on wanting the scale to go down, that's a corruption in collective consciousness that has produced the wage gap, because we're looking at we're focusing on numbers. It's also usually on a wheel, not always, but depending on the kind of scale used, we're putting emotional intensity and hypervigilance on getting a number related to our physical body to decrease. That every force evolves a form. So as a collective, as a group, the feminine collective has produced the wage gap by focusing on, we wish we were smaller. We wish we were smaller. We wish we didn't weigh so much. We wish we were less. We wish we were less. And focusing on that with so much fervor. And it produces an effect collectively where now we don't earn as much. So if you want to change that, take full responsibility for the change. And this is actually something you can really do. You don't have to tell everyone. I mean, you can. You can bring it into a discourse, into a conversation like I'm doing now. But that's not where your power is. Your power isn't in changing everyone and getting everyone to agree with you. I wish everyone knew this, so everyone did it. You don't have to do it that way. You could just reverse engineer it and say, well, the only person I can control, that I really have a right to control, is me. And I will speak my truth. I will tell them what I think. And maybe other people will do it too. But I'm going to take full responsibility for this issue. And I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to apply the inverse wave. And I'm going to say, this body represents everything that's ever been done to female bodies. The body hatred. How many women hate their bodies? And then they're upset at other people for hating their body. Yes, were we taught to do this? Absolutely. I know I was. Oh my God. Totally. We were all conditioned to do it. But so in order so who's in a better position to reverse engineer it than someone who has picked up every trace of this pattern? We're now going to haul it in the opposite direction. And I was in resistance to that. My guide said, you're going to gain 50 pounds. We want you to be relaxed about it. And I had a very hard, I'm still having a hard time with it. I'm not comfortable. They said that as soon as you learn to love it and you're relaxed about it, there will be no more need for the lesson, and then it's going to go away and it's just going to be healed. And I'm like, great, bring it on. But they're like, no, you can't be impatient to have it gone either. If you're impatient to have it gone, you're like, oh my God, I wake up every day like that. It's something that I'm really working on. I know why it's here. I know what I'm doing. It's directly related to abundance on earth. And they said you have to be willing to receive physical substance. in a way that it doesn't make you cringe and immediately give it away, or like, I wish this, if I want wealth, you can't keep it over there. You can't fight for it and view yourself as something other than wealthy. If you're viewing yourself as a poor person, and you're identifying with poor people, as I do a lot, and I'm usually on the side of fighting for the underdog. It's really a side of my preference, generally, historically. That's definitely my history. Fighting for the underdog, the ones who are just like a death's door. I love to bring them back up. I just love that. And I'm good at it, and I've trained for it. So I'm going to use it I'm going to use my own training, my own gifts. What gifts do you have when it looks like you're a fat, penniless slob? What's the wealth there? Part of my challenge is to see, how can you take yourself from being someone who's penniless and fat and like lays around, doesn't have a standard job and whatever. How can you find the nobility in that? Where is it? Do you actually know who you are? Do you actually honor your gifts? Do you appreciate your gifts? Can you claim them in a public forum? Can you pivot this circumstance while you're wearing it? And really, to a degree, if I'm honest, I'm in resistance to weighing this much. I can't stand it. It's more than I've ever weighed. But I also know what it's doing. So if I can keep myself in a place put myself in a place of appreciation, what is it here to teach me? What am I doing with it? And is it not perfect in this moment? It is perfect in this moment. I know exactly what it's doing. I have gone into receivership, and I'm also so I can make it mean something other than what people have told me it means. Where it doesn't mean I'm a fat, lazy slob. I am fat, granted, but I'm not lazy. I also know I'm not a slob. I'm an incredibly hard worker, and I love to work. I'm very diligent. I'm very targeted. And I'm also really good at my job, and I'm willing to do whatever the hell it takes. And if it means that I'm going to gain another 50 pounds to get this job done, to solve wage equality, which everyone has been fighting against, they've been doing it that way, and it doesn't work, I'll do it. Give me the 50 pounds. I'll make it equal. I'm going to love this thing into equality. I'm going to create this. I'm going to go into sacred creatorship. Own it. Own it from a place of love and not hostility. And say, okay, I'm going to bring this thing back into balance. And as soon as I'm balanced about it, and not imagining myself as a poor person where the wealth is over there, and not, if you hate wealthy people all the time, and you're always saying, criticizing the people with a lot of wealth, then you can never have it, because you're always viewing them as a different population. You have to view yourself as absolutely being of that population, and challenge yourself to actually be willing to receive it. So if you are constantly shaming yourself for being in the state of receivership, if you're allowing yourself to be shamed, if you're in a state of apology for receiving, then how can you receive? You're putting tension in the belief barrier. That's one of the reasons also the med beds isn't here. The med beds aren't here. That certain pervasive problems in society are there because it's a clashing of belief systems. And one of my jobs is to look at the energy, which is a gift. I look at where the energies in the belief systems are clashing. And then you can go directly to the layer in, it's kind of like clouds, or where is the density? It's like looking at an X-ray, like an energetic X-ray. You can see where the dark places are. You can see where the light avenues are. And you can say, okay, these things, where are the murky parts in the middle? And how do we get this thing through? How do we find peace from a place of complete division? You have to make a bridge. So I'll go be both sides of the bridge, and then I'll meet myself in the middle. I'll plot myself in the middle, and I will extend both arms and touch both extremes. God knows I have touched the poverty extreme. And the wealth extreme requires an enormous bandwidth. So fortunately, I've added a certain amount of tonnage, which I know won't be here for very long because I plan to pass it on. I also plan to pass it on. So you have to be able to meet the wealth. I do this meditation every day where I say certain prayers, but it's not about when I pray or when I meditate, it's not about praying to, although sometimes it does sound that way. I do sometimes pray to outside help like angelics, etc., for assistance, because it's hard to be in a physical body and still maintain all the clarity. Nothing wrong with using guides. Use your resources. But you're the one who's down here doing the work. So they are at a certain level. They're not, I mean, yes, they are above you, literally sometimes hovering, but you also can access them and it helps you adjust yourself so that you can do your job. The job on earth is ours to do. So you've got to take appropriate action, whatever it is. So I do a lot of praying. I also do a lot of meditating. And one of them, I do a lot of practical magic where I interact with tangible objects, because that's my challenge usually is going down. I have a very easy time going up. I have a very hard time, usually much more difficult, much harder for me to go down and interact in a comfortable way with tangible form. These two avenues clash a lot, and it produces a lot of physical pain when you're in too much resistance. So it helps to have a certain amount of, it helps to have tangible assistance at a certain bandwidth. I don't need tools at all. My own natural intuition is far better, but in order to help me access the populations where I'm trying to get to, it's helpful to have a bridge. So that's the reason that I don't use oracle cards, tarot cards. I have tons of them, but I don't use them for guidance the way people normally do. Some people start in density and they use these to access their intuition, but it's also possible, for the way I did it, is that my guides had told me to use tarot cards because I needed to find some way to access other intuitive people, because I was connected to nobody. I was like so far out. I was so far, I just have my own way of operating. And I can look at something and know what it means, but I can't relate to any other person. There was a time where I couldn't relate to my system of intuition and light language. I didn't know anybody else who did that. I didn't know any other people whose telepathy or who had, it's like there was just miscommunication everywhere. And my guides had said to help me find a way into systems, they recommended tarot cards and oracle decks. And now I have, I don't know, probably 150. I don't know how many, but I have a lot of oracle decks and I love them. It actually allowed me a way into an enjoyment of physical experience, because now I have a way of interacting. I needed some way. I needed some bridge. I needed some way. The same way like autistics. A lot of people are very, it helps them to have an access point, like a digital screen, because the place where they intersect on the digital, their mind functions that way, and it helps them. You meet your people where they are. So right now I'm making it my business to be able, let me say it that way, to be able to reach large amounts of wealth for the purpose of being a conduit and a bridge from the very poor population to the great wealth. And part of the problem is that it's like rock stars talk to rock stars. The people who have great wealth tend to hang out with people who have great wealth. But that's one of the reasons why the great wealth is not reaching the people where it needs to go. There's a mechanical nature to the way energy operates. So if you are somebody who can travel interdimensionally, or you can reach, if you have the ability to go from a place of density, a place of real compression and real lack, and also reach extreme wealth, that's what I'm trying to do now. So I have to be shameless about receiving it. So I receive donations with no apology whatsoever. This is part of my job. And I know that I'm altruistic. In fact, I asked for the job because I know perfectly well that when I receive wealth, I pass it forward. I pass everything forward. And I have a proven history of doing that. I'm not proving that I deserve it. I'm practicing for when I get more so that I can be a philanthropist and get the money to all the people that I have been watching them saying, this is my mission. I want to start a school. And I've listened to everything that they said. And I've been watching all of these people on social media. They want to get this community started. And everyone has great ideas. And I feel the truth. I've watched their persistence. And personally, also regarding the homeless crisis, I'm sorry, this is such an offshoot. I just feel like saying it. What are you doing? You're not peeing, are you? Okay, 1 second. I'm about to end this call because I'm going to take my dog out. But regarding the homeless crisis, I'm so glad that all of these communities are popping up that are making tiny homes for veterans. But it also, I think it's the very, very, very bare minimum. Some of the tiny houses, like you see these sometimes on social media, where this city got together and it created it got people off the streets. It got the veterans off the streets by giving them each a mini tiny home community. And these things are like twice the size of a coffin. It's the size of half a dumpster. I just think we can do better. Honestly, I think we can do better. Even if it's a shipping container home and something that has windows and a bathroom, I just think we can do better. I agree it's better than sleeping on a damn curb. But I also think it's frankly inexcusable to have an entire population in a city and you're building things for your veterans when you finally fucking got around to it. This is the extent of your generosity. I'm trying not to be bitter, but it's about the size of a car. You're like, here, you can hear. It's a community. The generous nature of our communities that we gave you something it's about twice the size of a coffin. Come on, step up your game. It's a piece of crap. Stop patting yourself on the back for your bare minimum effort. Step it up. And I would really like to take full responsibility for amping up the level of care too. It's an abused population. It's an oppressed population, right? Okay. I love you all. This was, all right. 3 hours, 12 minutes. Okay. On that note, I love you all. And if you can possibly send me a donation on PayPal, that would be fantastic. My name is Stephanie Ark Hogarth, and you can find me on Facebook if you're not watching it. On there now. My channel on YouTube is The Ascension Arc. And if you want to catch this later or look it over, yeah, that's where I am. Donations are very, very, very welcome. Thank you and appreciated. All right. I love you. Bye-bye.